Hiraku Machio wakes up in a spacious rustic log cabin and sits up in bed, reflecting on a dream about his difficult past life. He steps out of his room and encounters a maid with a single white horn holding a wooden staff. She apologizes for not having breakfast ready, but Hiraku tells her not to worry because he simply woke up early. He also asks her to stop calling him master, so she agrees to call him village chief instead. Hiraku walks into the kitchen and stretches, but the maid suddenly blasts a red slime inside a clay pot with blue magic. Hiraku tells her to spare the creature, so she extinguishes her magical flame. Stepping outside the cabin, Hiraku stretches under the bright blue sky and greets an elf girl carrying a wicker basket full of green herbs. An angel girl with large white wings suddenly lands nearby and cheerfully reports that there are no problems on her patrol route. Hiraku talks with the girls and mentions that he had a dream about his past life. Around the bustling farm, beastkin children run and play in the courtyard while others plant young saplings in the dark soil. Hiraku effortlessly lifts a massive wooden log to help with construction while elves and beastkin work together to build new structures. In the pastures, cows chew their cud, and black wolves run playfully alongside grazing sheep. Other villagers dry persimmons on wooden racks, and Hiraku watches a blonde merchant inspect the freshly harvested fruit. Giant black wolves carry small purple spiders on their backs as they patrol the lush forest surrounding the massive farm settlement. Hiraku smiles and realizes that his past self could never have imagined living such a perfect, peaceful life. The story then shifts back in time to the moment Hiraku died after living for 39 years. In a dark cosmic void, Hiraku's soul takes the form of a glowing orb in front of the god of the world, who holds a massive wooden club. God explains that Hiraku's life was completely filled with extreme hardships, betrayal, and a terminal illness. God admits that this miserable life was partly due to a divine mistake, so he offers to atone by giving Hiraku a second chance at life in a new world with a perfectly healthy body. Hiraku easily accepts his death and the offer. God asks what kind of life he wants to live this time. Hiraku explains that he was never sociable and spent years trapped in a hospital bed watching a television show about farming, so he desperately wants to live as a farmer in an isolated place far from civilization. God notes that agriculture falls under a different divine jurisdiction, but agrees to consult the god of farming. After securing permission, God swings his massive club and strikes Hiraku's soul, granting him the power of the omnipotent farming tool before sending him to his new life. Hiraku wakes up in a dense forest under a bright blue sky. He looks at his hands, stands up, and happily celebrates his brand new, healthy body. He decides to start his farming life immediately, but he realizes he is completely surrounded by massive trees and has no idea where he is. He summons the omnipotent farming tool, which instantly materializes in his hands as a glowing golden hoe. He strikes the ground and marvels at how the tool effortlessly cuts through roots and hard dirt to create fluffy soil. He also realizes that he does not feel tired at all when swinging it. Knowing he needs food and water to survive, Hiraku listens closely for the sound of a river, but hears absolutely nothing in the dense forest. His hoe suddenly catches on a tree trunk, making him realize that the forest is incredibly dangerous and he needs to establish a safe base quickly. He spots a colossal ancient tree towering over the canopy and decides to set up his camp right next to it. Since he cannot find surface water, he decides to dig a well. He tries to transform his tool into dowsing sticks, but the method fails to locate anything underground. He then attempts to summon heavy machinery like an excavator, but the tool refuses to take the shape of complex machines. Settling for a simple shovel, Hiraku starts digging a massive vertical hole into the earth. He digs extremely fast without getting tired, but he soon realizes he is stuck at the bottom of the deep pit. To escape, he uses the shovel to dig a diagonal tunnel upwards. During his excavation, his shovel strikes something hard and water instantly bursts from the ground. Thrilled that he secured a water source on his first try, Hiraku thanks God and moves on to finding food and shelter. Surprisingly, he does not feel hungry yet, which he assumes is another benefit of the omnipotent farming tool. He decides to clear the area around his base, so he summons an axe to chop down the massive tree blocking his future farm. He plans his cuts carefully, but the moment his axe strikes the trunk, a massive magical shockwave obliterates the wood and sends huge plumes of dust into the air. Terrified by the blast, Hiraku runs away in a panic. He cautiously returns to find the giant tree completely felled by a single strike, and he laughs at the absurd power of his new tool. He changes the tool into a hatchet and effortlessly peels the tough bark off the logs like cheese. He then summons a hook tool to drag the heavy timber across the clearing. Hiraku wants to build a proper log cabin, but he quickly realizes he cannot construct walls or a roof without nails or adhesive. Forced to improvise, he uses a chisel to hollow out a giant tree stump to serve as a temporary sleeping shelter. As the sun begins to set, Hiraku panics because he needs a light source to survive the dark forest. He tries to summon a flashlight, a lamp, a lighter, and a match, but the tool fails to create any of them because they likely violate God's rules on generating fire from nothing. Thinking quickly, Hiraku summons a magnifying glass instead. Since the sun goes down before he can use it, he retreats into his hollowed tree stump and drinks water from a wooden cup he carved. He realizes he can see perfectly in the dark thanks to his new healthy body. Looking up through the trees, he spots 2 moons in the night sky, completely confirming that he is truly in another world. The next morning, Hiraku uses the magnifying glass to focus the sunlight onto a pile of wood shavings. He carefully blows on the ember until it catches fire, finally securing a reliable heat source. He then transforms his tool into a pickaxe and begins clearing out a large patch of bushes and grass to create his fields. The constant physical exertion finally drains his energy, and he starts feeling incredibly hungry. Suddenly, a giant rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and massive fangs charges at him from the bushes. Startled by the beast, Hiraku swings his tool in the form of a scythe. A golden flash erupts, and he accidentally decapitates the rabbit in one hit. He butchers the monster with a knife tool and roasts the meat on skewers over his campfire. Hiraku notes that the meat tastes wild and reeks of blood, but he eats it gratefully to satisfy his hunger. Knowing he needs a place to relieve himself, he uses his tools and leftover wood to build a functional outhouse. He constructs a wooden seat, an underground waste tank, and a gas drainage pipe to keep the area clean and pleasant. With his basic needs met, Hiraku uses a silver hoe to plow several neat ridges in his newly cleared field. He wishes he could grow potatoes, onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, and corn, but he realizes he does not have a single seed to plant. Defeated, he goes to sleep in his tree stump. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up and is completely shocked to find vibrant green sprouts growing in every single row of his plowed field. He realizes that the omnipotent farming tool automatically plants crops based on his desires when he tills the soil. Determined to protect his precious new vegetables from the giant rabbits, Hiraku works tirelessly to fortify his farm. He builds a sturdy wooden fence around the perimeter and digs a deep defensive trench just outside the logs. Over the next few days, he hunts down any rabbit monsters that try to climb the fence and eats them for sustenance. He also discovers that watering the plants with a watering can formed by his tool makes them grow abnormally fast. Despite the rapid growth, he still has no idea what the plants actually are and worries that they might just be decorative flowers, fearing he will drop to his knees in despair if he cannot eat them. Tired of living inside a cramped tree stump, Hiraku spends his time constructing a proper log cabin. He cuts notches into the wooden beams to stack them securely without nails. To gain enough height for the ceiling, he digs the dirt floor down a few feet. He then covers the roof with large strips of tree bark and pins them in place with wooden pegs. Hiraku sits inside his newly finished cabin and smiles, incredibly satisfied with his sturdy new home. Just as his farming life starts to take off, 2 massive black wolves emerge from the forest and approach his fence. The wolves are covered in nasty scars, but they do not seem aggressive. Hiraku places a wooden plank over the trench to let them cross and offers them a platter of raw boar meat from a monster he killed earlier. The male wolf eats eagerly, but Hiraku notices the female wolf has a heavily swollen belly. Suddenly, the female wolf collapses onto the dirt and goes into labor. Panicking, Hiraku decides the outdoor clearing is too dangerous for a delivery, so he quickly guides the wolves inside his new log cabin. He lights a bonfire near the entrance to keep them warm and then steps outside to give them privacy, eventually falling asleep on the ground. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up and peeks inside the cabin. He is thrilled to see the female wolf resting peacefully while 4 tiny black puppies nurse from her belly. To celebrate the successful delivery, Hiraku cuts the best portion of his leftover boar meat and feeds it to the exhausted mother. The wolves show no signs of leaving and look perfectly happy in the cabin, so Hiraku decides to let them keep the building and immediately constructs a second, slightly better log cabin for himself. A few days later, Hiraku's crops finally mature. He uses gardening shears to harvest bright red tomatoes from the thick vines. He is incredibly relieved that the plants produced real food. To his surprise, the wolves happily eat the raw tomatoes alongside him. Seeing them enjoy the crops motivates Hiraku to grow even more delicious vegetables for his new companions. In return for the food and shelter, the wolves begin hunting wild game and patrolling the perimeter to keep the farm safe. Hiraku officially names the male wolf Kuro, the female wolf Yuki, and the 4 puppies Kuroichi, Kuroni, Kurosan, and Kuroyan. With his fields producing a massive harvest, Hiraku realizes he urgently needs to build a storage shed, new furniture, and more tools to process the food. He looks out over his thriving crops and his new wolf family, completely embracing the busy but deeply fulfilling farming life he always dreamed of having. Up in the cosmic void, God checks in on Hiraku. He realizes he accidentally gave the man a miserable past life full of suffering. He feels bad about it. However, he can't interfere now. He just hopes Hiraku is doing well in the dangerous forest of death. Down on the farm, Hiraku continues using his almighty farming tool and discovers more about how it works. He realizes that whatever crop he thinks about while tilling the soil automatically gets planted. He tests this by thinking of things like eggplant, spinach, and bean sprouts. Soon enough, all of them start growing perfectly without him needing to plant any actual seeds. The crops grow incredibly fast, which is great, but sometimes it catches him off guard. For example, his potatoes end up growing too fast. They get exposed to the sun and turn green. This makes them poisonous. To fix this, he learns to mound the dirt higher around the base of the plants to protect them from the sunlight. Since he has no real farming experience from his past life, he knows he just has to learn by trial and error. Feeling incredibly grateful for his new peaceful life, Hiraku carves 2 wooden statues of the gods and sets them up in a small shrine to thank them for his healthy body and his farm. His daily life settles into a nice routine. He cooks simple meals like rabbit meat and vegetable stew for himself and the wolves. The wolves love the meat, especially when he drains the blood properly. However, Hiraku constantly finds himself wishing he had some salt to season his food. Hoping to improve his diet in the future, he also plants some fruit trees like apples, pears, and persimmons. He knows they will take years to bear fruit, but he is completely willing to wait. Having the wolves around makes his life much easier and keeps him from feeling isolated. They act as perfect guides, allowing him to explore deeper into the forest without getting lost. During one of his explorations, he finds a river with a small waterfall about a 30-minute walk from his base. He decides to slowly dig a canal to bring the water all the way to his farm. Since he plans to work there often, he even builds a small outhouse at the construction site. To speed up the construction and travel, he transforms his farming tool into a wheelbarrow. He puts Kuro in it and runs at top speed through the forest. Unfortunately, he ends up crashing off a cliff. They both survive the fall just fine. Still, Hiraku realizes he needs to clear proper roads before trying that again. Back at the farm, he clears more trees and expands his fields to grow wheat, sugarcane, and oilseed rape for making oil. His bean sprouts eventually turn into soybeans. This makes him crave edamame. Sadly, he still lacks the salt needed to prepare it. As the days pass, the weather starts to get much colder. Hiraku notices snow on the distant mountains. He realizes winter is coming and tries to make warm clothes out of giant rabbit pelts. The pelts smell terrible and he worries they will rot. Because of this, he scraps the idea entirely. He figures his only option is to stockpile firewood and food and just huddle around the fireplace inside his cabin. One day, a massive black and white spider with red eyes drops down from the giant tree near his cabin. Hiraku is startled, but the wolves are completely calm. This shows the spider is not a threat. The spider weaves a high-quality handkerchief out of thin air and hands it to Hiraku. He is amazed by the craftsmanship and gives the spider some potatoes as a thank you. The spider, who Hiraku names Zabuton, takes up residence in the giant tree and starts making all sorts of things for him in exchange for food. Zabuton takes the smelly rabbit pelts Hiraku gave up on and turns them into a beautiful warm winter coat. With Zabuton also making bed sheets and curtains, Hiraku feels like his farm is becoming a real civilized home. Winter finally hits hard, bringing freezing temperatures and covering the entire forest in snow. Zabuton goes into hibernation up in the giant tree. Hiraku stays inside his cozy cabin with the wolves. Despite having enough food and warmth, the harsh winter makes him feel incredibly lonely. He realizes he hasn't spoken to another human in months and fears he might actually forget how to talk. Eventually, the snow melts and spring arrives. The 4 wolf pups are now fully grown. They head out into the forest and return a few days later with mates of their own. Zabuton also emerges from the giant tree carrying a bunch of baby spiders, revealing she is actually female. Hiraku is happy to see his animal companions thriving. Even so, seeing them all start families makes him feel even more jealous and lonely. With so many new mouths to feed, he gets right back to work expanding the fields. Sometime later, Zabuton rings an alarm bell she set up in the tree. Kuro quickly leads Hiraku into the forest to investigate. They find a young girl with white hair and pointed ears bound tightly in spiderwebs at the base of a tree. Hiraku is completely shocked to find another person out here. The girl begs for help while the wolves growl at her. Hiraku approaches cautiously, glad to finally hear someone else's voice. Suddenly, the girl breaks free from the webs. She lunges at him and bites hard into his neck. Using her magic, her body transforms from a child into a mature, beautiful woman. Hiraku is stunned. Before he can react, Kuro barks aggressively at the woman. She instantly shrinks back down into a child. She sits on the ground looking terrified and embarrassed. Hiraku asks if she is an enemy. She explains that she only attacked the wolves because she thought she could easily defeat one of them. Instead, they quickly overpowered her. She apologizes for sucking his blood. She explains she needed it to recover the energy she lost during the fight. That is also why she couldn't maintain her adult form. Hiraku feels a bit bad that his dogs beat her up so badly. He tells her to drink as much of his blood as she needs. She drinks more and is amazed by how much vitality he has. She notes that his blood is incredibly healthy. She transforms back into her adult form and formally introduces herself. They walk back to the farm together. She is absolutely amazed by the sheer size of the clearing and the crops. She has never seen tomatoes before. Hiraku picks one and gives it to her. She loves the taste and begs to see the rest of the farm. He shows her the corn and radishes, and they spend the afternoon harvesting vegetables together. That evening, they sit inside the cabin sharing a meal. The girl uses her magic to project a display of the plants to study them. She explains that her name is Lulu Lucy, and she is a vampire. She tells Hiraku that she is a researcher studying medicinal plants. She got into a conflict with some nobles who wanted to steal her work. To escape them, she fled into the forest of death to lay low. She figured no one would follow her into such a dangerous place. She is fascinated by all the unknown plants on his farm. She is also completely shocked that he managed to tame the deadly beasts of the forest. She asks Hiraku about the magic he uses to spawn his farming tools. He brushes it off as just a handy magic item. Lu admits she has lived a very long time but still has much to learn. She asks if she can stay at the farm a little longer to continue her research. Hearing this, Hiraku slams his cup on the table and asks her to stay with him forever. Lu is completely flustered by the sudden request. Hiraku passionately explains that he originally wanted to live alone. Unfortunately, the isolation of the winter completely broke him. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in solitude. He begs her to stay. He ignores her warnings about the nobles chasing her and the fact that she is a vampire. Overwhelmed by his desperation, Lu shyly agrees to stay. She points out that they barely know each other. The whole thing feels incredibly sudden. She then realizes that asking a woman to stay with him forever is essentially a marriage proposal. Hiraku is taken aback for a second, but confidently confirms that it is exactly what he meant. They both feel incredibly embarrassed. Still, Lu smiles and accepts. Overjoyed, Hiraku scoops her up and runs outside in celebration. She yells at him to slow down. The next morning, Hiraku is busy tilling the soil in a field when Lu approaches him to say good morning. She is back in her child form. Hiraku asks her why. She explains it is for her own protection so he won't be tempted to touch her. Hiraku nervously agrees to restrain himself. They get back to discussing the farm, and Hiraku mentions he wants to grow sweet potatoes next because they are easy to store and feed a lot of people. He happily notes that since Lu is the first actual person to move in, she is officially the first villager of his new settlement. Lu laughs at the idea of calling this place a village. Hiraku points out that between the wolves, the spiders, and now her, they have around 30 residents. They then talk about growing the medicinal herbs Lu needs for her research. She assumes they have to go out and find seeds. Hiraku confidently tells her that with his farming tool, they don't need seeds at all. As Hiraku continues to improve his farm, Lu helps out around the property in various ways. She uses basic magic to illuminate the inside of the new wooden sheds with a bright golden light. Hiraku is amazed by the brilliant illumination, but Lu simply brushes it off as basic magic that anyone can do. Later, they eat a hearty meal of thick meat and green asparagus. Hiraku mentions the incredibly mild flavor is just because he does not have any salt, and admits he was about to give up searching for it entirely. Lu looks at him intensely and points out that there is plenty of rock salt right inside the nearby cave walls. She explains they just need to dissolve the rocks in water and boil the mixture down to extract the salt. Hiraku realizes he dug right past the salt layers without ever noticing them during his agricultural work. The next morning, Lu wakes up in a great mood and greets Hiraku before they start their daily chores. He decides to check on the fruit trees, so they head over to the orchard together. They sit near the young green saplings to take a break, while Kuro rests peacefully on the ground nearby. Hiraku explains to Lu that he planted oranges and peaches, and plans to plant chestnuts since fruit trees take much longer to grow and mature than regular vegetables. Lu drinks some hot herbal tea and looks forward to seeing how the harvest turns out. Hiraku mentions he actually wants to drink green tea instead of the herbal tea Lu usually makes. He remembers reading that oolong tea and black tea are all processed from the exact same leaves, so he plans to figure out the proper processing method to make green tea soon. Suddenly, a blonde angel named Tia crashes into the forest clearing. She is immediately cornered by Kuro, Yuki, and the other dark-horned wolves. Tia cries and begs for forgiveness, admitting she was completely wrong to attack the pack first. Hiraku watches the chaos with Lu and realizes he has seen this exact situation play out before when Lu first arrived at the farm. He decides to step in, calls the aggressive wolves off, and rescues Tia from the beasts. Tia recovers quickly and uses her magic to clean her white clothes and heal her injuries. Hiraku praises her impressive magical abilities and welcomes her. However, Tia suddenly spots Lu standing nearby and instantly yells at her to stop resisting and surrender. She tries to arrest Lu, but she is quickly ambushed by the horned wolves all over again, leaving her trapped in a comical scuffle while Hiraku tries to calm everyone down. Inside the cabin, Tia finally sits down with Hiraku and Lu to talk things over. Tia admits fighting the wolves is a literal death sentence, and Hiraku relates to her terrible experience. Tia then asks who Hiraku is and Lu shyly admits he is her husband. Tia is completely shocked by this unexpected revelation. She introduces herself properly as an angel, and Hiraku assumes she serves God directly. Tia corrects his assumption, explaining that angels are actually a race of highly capable warriors who just happen to have more muscles than brains, though they were worshipped briefly by humans in the past. Hiraku asks why she is chasing Lu all the way out into this dangerous forest. Tia explains that Lu has a massive bounty on her head for going on a rampage and completely blowing up a noble's estate in the city. Lu defends her actions, claiming the annoying noble was incessantly demanding experimental medicines and drugs, so she decided to teach them a harsh lesson, and the massive explosion was just an accident. Tia insists Lu besmirched a noble's honor and broke the law, but Lu admits she went a little too far and refuses to go back. Lu tells Tia that she is hiding in the forest because Tia is slightly stronger than her, but fighting the wolves made her realize how weak she actually is compared to the monsters here. Lu then completely changes the subject and invites Tia to live with them on the farm. Tia is confused by the sudden offer, but Lu excitedly promises to show her the crop fields and drags a hesitant Tia outside. Lu proudly shows Tia the vast vegetable fields and the growing orchard. Tia is amazed by the rapid agricultural progress. Then, Lu takes her into the rocky cave and introduces her to Zabuton, the giant spider monster. Tia is instantly terrified by the creature and faints on the spot. Lu and Hiraku realize Tia might have a severe phobia of spiders. Later, Lu wakes Tia up and tells her they are going to harvest crops together. Tia is still exhausted from the ordeal, but reluctantly follows them out to the cabbage patch. Hiraku explains they desperately need another set of hands, and Tia realizes she is expected to do intense manual farm work. She complains about an angel having to get her hands dirty, but Lu cheerfully forces her to help with the harvest anyway. Hiraku shows Tia how to pick a large green cabbage straight from the dirt. Tia struggles a bit with the heavy vegetable, but manages to harvest it successfully. Hiraku then prepares a simple snack by tearing the fresh cabbage leaves and sprinkling them with the rock salt they recently processed from the cave. Tia takes a bite and is absolutely amazed by the delicious fresh flavor of the raw vegetables. Hiraku agrees that growing crops yourself makes them taste even better. By sunset, they have harvested a massive amount of produce, filling several large woven baskets with cabbage, celery, and strawberries. Hiraku is exhausted, but Tia mentions how fulfilling the hard farm work actually feels. Lu uses this opportunity to pressure Tia into moving in permanently, claiming she desperately needs help, and her body cannot handle all the physical labor alone. Tia is flustered and confused by Lu's suggestive wording, but she ultimately agrees to stay. The three of them start working together to manage the expanding farm. Tia and Lu use their magic to easily carry heavy wooden logs alongside a massive stone's golem, significantly speeding up their construction and farming tasks. Tia gathers cabbages efficiently and gets complimented by Lu, though she remains slightly defensive about her new lifestyle. Hiraku wishes they could grow more strawberries, but he admits they are at maximum capacity and would not be able to harvest everything in time before it rots. Tia agrees they need more help, while Lu jokes about Tia slacking off. When they return to the cabin, they discover that Kuro and Yuki's children have grown horns and are already having puppies of their own. The wolf family is expanding so rapidly that Hiraku realizes the old wooden hut will not be big enough for all of them. He decides to build a large dog area next to the orchard to house the growing pack safely. He struggles to come up with names for all the new puppies since there are so many of them now. Around the same time, Zabuton's baby spiders use silk parachutes to catch the wind and leave the forest to start their own journeys elsewhere. Hiraku is slightly disappointed since he planned to let them live in the orchard, but he happily notices a few spiderlings decide to stay behind on the farm. Tia suddenly announces she needs to step out for a while. Hiraku assumes she is leaving them for good, but she promises to return soon and flies off high into the sky. A few days later, Tia returns just as promised, but she brings a large group of 7 high elf women with her. Hiraku is extremely surprised by the new arrivals. The high elves all wear matching green and white uniforms. They introduce themselves with very similar names: Leah, Leaf, Lekot, Lize, Lili, Lita, and Lise. Leah explains they are all closely related, and their ages range from 300 to over 400 years old. Tia explains she suggested they move to the farm because they have a tragic past. 200 years ago, their village in the north was completely destroyed after getting dragged into a human war. Since then, their entire race was scattered, and they have been wandering the forest looking for a safe place to settle down and finally repopulate. They beg Hiraku to let them stay on the farm. Tia and Lu vouch for the elves, assuring Hiraku they are incredibly excellent workers. Hiraku agrees to let them live on the farm as long as everyone gets along. The elves are overjoyed by his generosity. However, when Leah asks who else lives on the farm, Lu casually introduces them to Zabuton and the terrifying wolves. The massive monsters cause all 7 high elves to faint from sheer shock immediately. Once the elves recover from the scare, Hiraku realizes they need a large place to sleep. Leah says all 7 of them want to live together, so they decide to build one massive house for the group. Hiraku starts the project by digging a ditch and setting up a wooden fence, a toilet, and a garbage disposal area. He cuts down an unbreakable giant tree with his magic tool, easily impressing the elves. It turns out, the high elves are incredibly skilled at construction, lumber processing, and fitting wooden logs together seamlessly. Hiraku just follows their expert instructions, focusing entirely on digging holes, leveling the ground, and gathering building materials. After 10 days of hard work, they successfully finish building a large 2-story log cabin. Tia and Lu are amazed by the beautiful new house, and feel slightly jealous of how nice it is compared to their own small hut. Hiraku feels inspired by their technique and considers rebuilding his own cabin soon. The new house is shaped like a long rectangle that stretches from east to west. It features a large central open design living and dining room on the first floor for communal meals, flanked by spacious storage rooms. The second floor sits on top of the storage rooms and holds individual bedrooms for each of the elves, and the entire place is perfectly illuminated by magical lighting. Hiraku looks down from the balcony and genuinely hopes this new house will give the elves a safe and peaceful home. The elves quickly adapt to farm life and do an excellent job harvesting the vegetables. Hiraku spots them eating raw garlic and onions right out of the ground, which deeply surprises him. He is even more shocked to learn that they eagerly eat meat and use fire constantly. He admits he always stereotyped elves as nature-loving vegetarians who refuse to use fire or wear metal. The elves laugh at his naive ideas, explaining that trying to live like that in a harsh forest would be a quick death sentence. They quickly prove to be hardcore survivalists. To thank Hiraku for his hospitality, the elves offer to do mining and blacksmithing work for him. Hiraku is surprised again, assuming only stout dwarves did that kind of heavy work. The elves build a stone furnace, collect iron sand from the river, and use charcoal to smelt and forge iron tools. They quickly create a brand new metal cooking pan. Hiraku is thrilled that their civilization is advancing so fast. Leah proudly states they learned to do absolutely everything during their 200 years of wandering, except settle down and reproduce. Hiraku decides not to comment on the reproduction part to avoid any awkwardness. Later, Hiraku, Lu, and Tia gather medicinal herbs with the elves. Leah notices the wheat fields and asks if she can bake some bread. Hiraku explains they already processed all their wheat into flour for storage, so he gives her permission to use it. Leah reveals she has a ceramic jar filled with natural yeast that makes the bread rise perfectly. The elves get to work, forming the dough into small balls and roasting them on skewers over a hot fire pit. The freshly baked spiral bread is absolutely delicious. Hiraku, Tia, and the elves all enjoy the amazing treat together. Hiraku realizes that since they can bake real bread now, he desperately wants to expand the wheat fields. As they eat, Hiraku asks Lu if anyone actually owns the land they are farming on right now. Lu casually mentions that the entire forest is technically under the absolute control of the Demon Lord. Hiraku panics, terrified that the demon lord might be angry about him building a farm directly on his territory. Lu asks if Hiraku received any support or permission when he started building the settlement. Hiraku says no. Lu confidently concludes that since he built everything entirely on his own without any help, the land belongs to him. Hiraku accepts this logic and feels completely relieved. That night, Tia and Lu sit inside the cabin, eating fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. Tia comments on how special Hiraku is, noting that he managed to tame infernal wolves and a demon spider, and his crops grow incredibly well. However, she also points out his complete lack of common sense regarding the outside world, like his total misconceptions about elves and angels. Lu agrees that his lack of knowledge is very surprising. Meanwhile, Hiraku sits alone at his table, drinking from his mug and thinking about his next big project. He decides to ask Leah and the High Elves to help him build a waterway tomorrow, completely satisfied with his expanding farm life. The next morning, Hiraku gets ready to start his daily farm chores. He heads out into the fields but suddenly stops when he sees Zabuton successfully trap a massive bee in her thick silk webs. Hiraku notices the bee is wearing a tiny golden crown and quickly realizes it is a queen bee. Because she stops fighting back, he decides not to kill her and instead figures he can keep her as a pet to produce honey. He takes his tools and builds a small wooden house specifically for the bee's nest near his growing orchard. Within 10 days, the bees construct a massive hive inside the new shelter. Hiraku watches the regular-sized worker bees fly around to do their jobs. He realizes he needs to plant a dedicated flower garden nearby so the bees have enough nectar to actually make harvestable honey. While he examines the giant swarming nest, Tia suddenly peeks through the doorway. The moment she spots the giant hornets, she gets absolutely terrified and immediately runs away. Hiraku assumes she must have been stung by a bee in the past. After dealing with the bees, Hiraku meets up with Leah to inspect the large reservoir he recently dug out. He explains his plan to draw water from the distant river through a long waterway, but he admits he has not figured out what building materials to use yet. He initially thought about using stone, but Leah points out that it would be extremely difficult to find enough workable stone in this area. Hiraku then considers using wood, but he knows that a long wooden aqueduct will eventually leak at the joints. He comes up with a different solution and decides to use the massive piles of leftover dirt from digging the reservoir. He uses his magical farming tool to tightly compact the dirt into sturdy U-shaped blocks, making the soil as hard as solid concrete. The elves quickly jump in to help him with the mass production. The girls carry baskets of dirt, while Hiraku hammers the materials into shape. They build a solid foundation from the waterfall all the way to the settlement and place the hardened dirt channels on top. The elves carefully align the heavy pieces and seal all the seams to prevent any water from escaping. Thanks to everyone's hard work, the construction finishes much faster than Hiraku expected. Water finally flows perfectly from the river directly into the reservoir, saving them from having to pull water from the deep well every single day. Suddenly, a large silver fish flops out of the flowing water and lands right on the wooden platform. Hiraku is thrilled to finally have access to fresh fish. He recognizes the creature as one of the vicious, sharp-toothed fish native to the surrounding forest, but he is just happy they are so easy to catch. He immediately slashes the fish into clean pieces with his hoe and skewers it over a campfire to roast. Lu and Tia watch him nervously, wondering if it is actually safe to eat such a dangerous monster. Hiraku ignores their worries, takes a bite of the grilled meat, and notes that it tastes exactly like regular salmon. He offers some to Lu and Tia, who hesitantly try it. Their fear instantly vanishes, and they cry tears of joy over how delicious the fish is. Hiraku then offers the meal to the curious elf girls, who also absolutely love it. Since the fish are a massive hit, they catch a bunch more, preserve them with salt, and store them away for the upcoming winter. With the new water supply fully functional, Hiraku decides to experiment with his farming tool. He tills a small patch of normal soil while thinking about rice, and golden stalks instantly sprout from the ground. Since he knows he can grow it, he decides to build a proper flooded rice paddy. He uses his tool to dig a massive trench, striking the earth with immense force and sending shockwaves through the clearing. Lu and Tia watch him train with completely bewildered expressions. Once the trench is ready, Hiraku floods it with water and magically grows fresh green rice seedlings. He hands bundles of the seedlings to the elves and explains how to plant them in the shallow, muddy water. The girls are a bit nervous about wading into the murky water at first, but they quickly get the hang of it and plant perfectly straight rows. To keep the crops safe, Hiraku tasks Zabuton's baby spiders with protecting the paddy from any pests. The rice plants grow incredibly fast, and soon the field is filled with golden stalks ready for harvest. Hiraku and the elves use sickles to rapidly cut down the entire crop. Afterward, they tie the bundles together and hang them on wooden racks to dry out under the sun. Leah asks Hiraku how he knows so much about farming techniques, but he just brushes it off, claiming he learned it from watching an idol on television. Once the rice is dry, Hiraku builds a spiked wooden threshing machine to separate the grain from the stalks. He then passes the grains through a sieve to remove the loose leaves. Next, he uses a heavy stone mortar and a wooden pestle to manually hull and polish the rice. The process requires a massive amount of physical labor, leaving the girls completely exhausted. They ask if they really have to do all this just to eat, and Hiraku confirms it is necessary. Finally, he takes the polished white rice to a stone stove and prepares to cook it in a metal pot. He explains the traditional cooking method, noting that the fire needs to start slow and low. Lu eagerly offers to light the fire with her magic, but she instantly summons a massive, destructive dark aura. Hiraku quickly stops her, reminding her he only needs a small flame. Once the fire is properly lit, they wait for the rice to steam. The elves hide behind a tree, curious about what kind of strange food he is making this time. Hiraku lifts the lid, revealing perfectly fluffy white rice. He quickly scoops out portions and molds them into large steaming rice balls, using the salted salmon they caught earlier as a filling. He serves the onigiri to Lu and Tia. They are skeptical at first, wondering why he spent so much time on such a simple dish, but the moment they take a bite, they are completely overwhelmed by the amazing flavor. The salty fish pairs perfectly with the rice. The elves also try the food and experience the exact same pure bliss. Hiraku sits back completely satisfied and declares this his happiest moment as a farmer yet. Later that day, Hiraku and one of the elves finish up some muddy work in the fields. The elf uses a quick magic spell to instantly clean all the dirt off her body and clothes. Hiraku realizes he cannot use magic like that and complains that he desperately wants a hot bath. He decides to build a bathhouse and explains the concept to the girls, drawing a detailed floor plan in the dirt. The plan includes a furnace, a tub, a washing area, and a changing room. The elves suggest just washing in the river, but Hiraku reminds them it will be way too cold in the winter. He passionately yells about the health benefits of bathing until the girls agree to help him. They build the furnace out of compacted dirt blocks and construct a massive wooden tub, filling it with water from the new aqueduct. However, Hiraku realizes he has a major problem. He is worried about draining their dirty bathwater directly back into the river. Tia easily solves this issue by suggesting they use slimes to purify the wastewater. Hiraku is terrified of slimes, thinking they are deadly monsters that kill new adventurers, but Tia assures him they are harmless cleaners. She flies off to the starting village and quickly returns with several bouncy blue slimes. Hiraku sets up a designated purification pool for the slimes in the wastewater channel. Tia also suggests putting slimes directly into the toilet to handle the waste there. Hiraku agrees it is practical, but he admits he lacks the courage to do his business right on top of a living slime's head. With the plumbing sorted out, Hiraku goes to gather firewood for the furnace. While picking up logs, he notices wild mushrooms growing on the bark. He is too afraid to eat them because he does not know which ones are poisonous. Lu agrees that wild mushrooms are incredibly difficult to tell apart, and the elves have conflicting opinions on whether to eat them or just burn them all. To stay safe, Hiraku uses his farming tool to specifically grow edible varieties like shiitake and shimeji on the logs. Finally, the bathhouse is completely finished and heated up. Hiraku gathers the girls outside and explains the rules of bathing. He tells them they need to undress in the changing room, rinse off in the washing area, and then soak in the tub. The girls are confused by the instructions and ask him to demonstrate. Hiraku gets flustered but agrees. He strips down, goes inside, washes himself, and sinks into the steaming hot water with a blissful expression. He completely zones out, remembering how he was never allowed to take baths while stuck in the hospital during his previous life. Suddenly, the girls excitedly strip off their clothes and jump into the water right next to him. Hiraku gets incredibly embarrassed by the situation. He quickly excuses himself and gets out early, telling them to take their time. The girls complain, thinking he just wants to keep the bath all to himself so he does not have to share. Sometime later, Kuro and the other wolves approach Hiraku in the clearing. They bring 5 new elf girls with them. The new arrivals introduce themselves as Lafa, Lhasa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. They explain they are from the exact same northern village as Leah and the others. They have been wandering the forest for 200 years looking for a place to live. Hiraku immediately invites them to stay on the farm. Leah gets incredibly excited and suggests they build an entirely new house to accommodate everyone. The new elves cheer triumphantly, declaring they will build homes and immediately start making children to revive their race. Hiraku hears this and gets a nervous sweat drop, choosing to completely ignore their aggressive repopulation plans. Meanwhile, Kuro watches the growing settlement from a distance and thinks back to his past. He remembers when he was a lone, undefeated male wolf wandering the dark forest. He spent his days doing whatever he pleased until he met a female wolf named Yuki. He fought her, lost completely, and they became mates. Soon after, Yuki got pregnant. They planned to raise a family, but their luck ran out when they encountered a massive grappler bear, the absolute king of the forest. They barely survived the encounter but were left gravely injured and starving. Driven away by their usual prey, they wandered deep into the center of the forest where even the bear refused to go. There they found a human male holding a farming tool. Kuro initially thought the human looked weak, but he instantly sensed a limitless, terrifying power radiating from the tool. Kuro and Yuki accepted their impending deaths, but instead of killing them, the human offered them fresh great boar meat and took care of their wounds. They decided right then to serve the human as their master. Hiraku gave them names, built them a home, and constantly fed them delicious food, especially the innards which he never threw away. Before long their pups grew up and the wolf pack expanded massively. Kuro looks around the farm, observing all the female elves, the vampire, and the angel that his master now leads. He realizes Hiraku is far more powerful than he ever imagined. However, Kuro also knows that Hiraku is completely clueless about their true nature. Hiraku still has no idea that Kuro and his family are actually terrifying, legendary inferno wolves. Despite this misunderstanding, Kuro does not care at all. He is just extremely thankful that his good fortune led him to this farm and to his master. With the new elves helping out, the group finally finishes building a massive 2-story log mansion. Hiraku, Leah, and the other elves stand in the dusty courtyard, admiring the impressive structure. Leah enthusiastically suggests they add a cellar, so Hiraku uses his farming tool to dig out a large basement area. The elves mention they made sure to incorporate all the future residents' requests into the design, and Leah points out that it would not feel right if Hiraku did not have the nicest house in the village. They decide to take a tour of the interior. They start in the main hall, designed as a central gathering place for everyone to hang out. Opposite the main hall is the dining room, featuring a long wooden table. In the back is a spacious kitchen, though they also set up additional stone stoves outside. Hiraku and the girls then head down into the new cellar, noting it will be perfect for storing food and firewood during the cold months. Moving to the second floor, they explore the new private bedrooms. The girls are thrilled to finally have their own spaces since the old cabin was getting far too crowded. While walking down the hallway, Hiraku notices one room that inexplicably has a heavy bolt lock on the outside of the door. He wisely decides to pretend he never saw it and moves on. The tour concludes in the bathroom, where the elves are delighted to find a massive, functional wooden bathtub. The elves thank Hiraku for the wonderful home, promising to let him know if any part needs fixing. To add a finishing touch to the entrance, Hiraku uses his farming tool to sculpt large stone statues of the horned wolves, placing them right outside the double wooden doors. Later that day, Hiraku heads to the kitchen with his freshly gathered ingredients. He tells Lu and Tia that he wants to try making a completely new dish called curry. He explains that mastering it from scratch takes a lot of work. In a comedic misunderstanding, Lu pictures herself being cooked in the stew and yells at him, but Hiraku brushes off her confusion. They head outside to the lush crop fields, where Lu is amazed by the sheer variety of plants Hiraku has managed to grow. He explains that his farming tool allows him to cultivate crops highly sensitive to seasonal weather. He gathers the necessary spices for the curry, starting with cumin. The girls examine the dried seeds and note their peculiar smell. Next, he harvests turmeric roots, explaining they give the curry its signature yellow color, and asks the elves to magically dry them. Moving on to coriander, he shows them how the ground seeds produce a fresh aroma. However, when he offers the green cilantro leaves to Kuro and the wolves, the beasts react with absolute horror, jumping back. Lu and Tia are shocked to realize the plant drives off the legendary inferno wolves and declare it is worth researching. Hiraku finishes gathering black pepper and cayenne peppers, privately worrying that making curry from scratch might make him look annoying. Back at the cooking station, he puts on his apron and sets up his ingredients. He notices Leah is his only helper and asks where Lu and Tia went. Leah happily informs him they are busy researching the cilantro as a magical protection talisman. Hiraku and Leah start by heating up rapeseed oil in a large metal pan. He adds chunks of rabbit meat to the oil, instructing Leah to brown the meat slightly, and then take it off the heat so it does not overcook. Meanwhile, Leah grinds the turmeric, coriander, and other spices into a fine powder. Hiraku cooks the cumin seeds in the leftover meat juices to extract their rich aroma, warning her not to burn them. Next, they sauté finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic until they form a paste. They toss in diced tomatoes in the spice mix, adding a dash of salt. After cooking the base down, Hiraku adds the browned rabbit meat, boiled soybeans, and a generous amount of water. He puts a wooden lid over the bubbling pot and tells Leah they just need to let it simmer. While they wait, Hiraku suddenly realizes he forgot to make naan to go with the curry. The elves have no idea what naan is, so he rushes to prepare the dough. He needs a large batch, calculating that he needs enough portions for everyone. He shows Leah how to roll the dough flat with a wooden rolling pin. Lacking a traditional oven, he improvises by sticking the flattened dough onto the hot exterior of an overturned metal pot over the fire. The delicious scent of the roasting bread and simmering spices drifts across the settlement, drawing Lu, Tia, and the rest of the hungry elves. By the time the sun sets, the massive batch of curry and naan is ready. Hiraku serves the steaming brown stew alongside the toasted flatbread to the gathered girls. Lu is initially hesitant to try it because of its strange color, but Hiraku encourages her. The girls take their first bites, using the naan to scoop up the savory meat and sauce. They are instantly blown away by the rich, complex flavors and the tingly spiciness. Lu notes how the unique ratio of spices changes the flavor profile, while Tia declares the dish is definitely worth researching. All the elves praise the food, eagerly asking for more. Hiraku is thrilled that his recipe is a success, but when he asks them to leave a little portion for him, he realizes the pots are already empty. Even the wolves devour the spicy food in seconds. Though he is left hungry, Hiraku is happy he memorized the recipe and plans to tweak the spice ratios next time. Soon, the temperature drops, and the first signs of winter begin to appear. Knowing they will be stuck indoors once the snow piles up, Hiraku focuses on finishing their winter preparations. He chops and stacks a massive amount of firewood in the storage shed. He then takes a cart full of potatoes and extra blankets out to the ancient tree, offering them to Zabuton before the giant spider goes into hibernation in the high branches. Nearby, Leah and the other elves are busy finishing a new wooden forge and other outdoor projects before the freeze. Because Kuro and the wolves will struggle to hunt in the deep snow, Hiraku asks Lu and Tia to help preserve as much food as possible. They use their fire magic to smoke and dry thick slabs of meat on wooden racks, though the wolves manage to steal a few pieces right off the skewers. To preserve their vegetable harvest, Hiraku builds a large wooden structure with multiple compartments. He places cabbages and radishes in the top boxes, leaves the bottom boxes empty to catch melted water, covers the whole thing with a magical sheet, and buries it in snow. This snow storage system ensures their vegetables stay fresh and dry throughout the winter. Watching Lu and Tia constantly use magic for their chores, Hiraku feels a sudden urge to try it himself. He points his hands at the storage box and tries to cast a wind or fire spell, but absolutely nothing happens. That night, while sitting by the fireplace in the cozy log cabin, he complains to Lu about his failure. Lu explains that even a simple ignition spell requires extensive magical study. Hiraku admits he thought he could do it because she and Tia make it look so effortless. He praises Tia for being able to summon and command massive stone golems, acknowledging how incredibly difficult that magic is. He tells Lu he feels a bit useless since he only does gardening and cooking, but Lu completely disagrees. She points out that surviving alone in this dangerous forest for as long as he did is a feat no one else has ever accomplished. She insists he is the most amazing person there, bringing a gentle smile to Hiraku's face. Eventually, heavy snow blankets the entire settlement, forcing everyone indoors. To pass the time, Hiraku carves several wooden tabletop games, including reversi, chess, and mahjong. He introduces reversi to the girls, explaining the simple rules of flipping the opponent's pieces. Lu challenges Tia to a match, but Tia quickly gains the upper hand. Unable to accept defeat, Lu flips the board in frustration, sending the pieces flying. Tia calmly uses her magic to levitate the scattered pieces right back to their exact previous positions, completely neutralizing Lu's tantrum. Hakua decides to play chess against Kuro. Hiraku is shocked to see the giant wolf moving the pieces with his paw, actually understanding the complex rules and executing real strategies. The wolves turn out to be terrifyingly good at board games, leading Lu to sulk in the corner after suffering a crushing defeat. Hoping to avenge her, Hiraku challenges the girls and the wolves to mahjong, assuming the game is far too complicated for animals. However, Kuro and another player immediately call a double Ron, hitting Hiraku with a devastatingly high-scoring hand. Hiraku loses all his points in record time, declaring Kuro the absolute champion. Realizing that sitting around playing board games all winter is bad for their health, Hiraka decides to invent a more active indoor activity. He carves a set of wooden bowling pins and a round wooden ball. To make the game more entertaining, he paints comical, villainous faces on the pins, labeling them as scam artists, arsonists, and serial killers. When Lu asks why they are knocking them down, Hiraku jokes that they are taking out the bad guys. He demonstrates by hurling the ball down the hallway, scattering the pins with a satisfying clatter. The girls cheer enthusiastically, and the mini bowling alley becomes a massive hit among the residents. The rest of the winter passes warmly and cheerfully as they spend their days playing games and sharing massive, steaming pots of meat and vegetable stew. Eventually, the snow begins to melt, and spring finally arrives at the farm. Hiraku steps out of the cabin, enjoying the warm morning sun and the clear blue sky. He greets Lu and Tia, mentioning that he wants to finish planting the new crops as soon as possible. He also notes that Zabuton should be waking up from her hibernation soon. Suddenly, they hear a loud, rapid tapping noise echoing through the sky. Lu points upward, and they are shocked to see a massive red-winged creature rapidly descending toward the forest. Tia identifies it as a highly dangerous wyvern. The creature prepares to strike, but before anyone can react, a colossal magic beam shoots up from the ground, instantly vaporizing the wyvern in a blinding flash of light and leaving the group staring up at the empty sky in utter disbelief. The massive wyvern swoops down toward the forest and unleashes a giant fireball toward the group. Lu quickly sets up a magical barrier to protect the area. The fireball crashes into the barrier and shatters it into pieces. The elves panic and scramble to put out the fires spreading through the brush. They debate escaping into the woods, but they realize the wyvern will just track them from the sky. Hiraku knows he has to make a quick decision. He summons his golden magic and transforms his tool into a glowing spear. The wyvern dives down and causes a massive shockwave. Hiraku shouts that he will crush the monster. He throws the spear and it intercepts the wyvern mid-air. A colossal magical explosion completely engulfs the beast. The wyvern's body splits open and it crashes into the distant mountains. The elves finish putting out the fires and confirm that the buildings are completely fine. Only a few crop fields took minor damage. Hiraku asks if there are a lot of these creatures around. Lu explains they usually stay in their own territories, so this is extremely rare. She doubts someone sent it to attack them on purpose. Hiraku asks the most important question on his mind. He wants to know if wyvern meat is edible. That evening, Hiraku prepares a massive feast using the wyvern meat. Lu mentions that wyvern is considered an absolute delicacy. She tells a story about a king who sent an entire army into a wyvern den just to get a taste, but Hiraku guesses they all got burned alive. He serves the food to his hungry companions. He grills a thick round steak with spices. He wraps the breast meat inside large leaves and steams it to perfection. He also simmers the tail meat into a rich vegetable stew. The girls try the food and are amazed by how tender and delicious it is. The meat was so tough earlier that a regular knife could not even scratch its skin. Everyone enjoys the meal and feels grateful for their good fortune. They realize they are lucky to have Kuro and the wolves around to protect them. Hiraku tells Lu to swallow her food before talking. Meanwhile, news of the wyvern's death reaches the demon lord's castle in the demonic kingdom of Galgardo. The demon generals Bezel, Randon, and Gratz sit at a long table in a total panic. They cannot believe someone took down a wyvern from the ground in just 2 hits. Randon points out that even a single wyvern usually requires their entire military force to defeat. He stresses over their newly approved budget and completely loses his mind. He suggests they all just resign from their positions to avoid dealing with the threat. Bezel begs him not to run away. Far away in another castle, the gatekeeper dragon Drime discusses the incident with his assistant Gucci. Drime admits that an attack of that power would easily pierce right through his own body. He decides it would be incredibly foolish to ever pick a fight with whoever killed the wyvern. The next day, Hiraku thinks about their delicious meal and realizes they are missing alcohol. He decides it is finally time to make wine from their grapes. He gathers the elves and explains the process. They quickly harvest all the ripe grapes from the vineyard. The high elf Lalasha uses her skills to build several watertight wooden barrels for the wine. Hiraku sets up a massive wooden vat. The girls step into the vat and begin stomping the grapes with their bare feet. They struggle to find a good rhythm at first. One of the elves suggests they sing an old working song from their village to keep time. They start singing and easily synchronize their movements. Zabuton the giant spider even provides a magical slime to help mash the fruit. The girls drag Hiraku into the vat to join the fun. They fill up 16 large barrels with grape mash. Sylvia and Kazuna worry they did not make enough since everyone will want to drink it immediately. High above in the divine realm, the goddess of agriculture yells at the creator god. She scolds him for giving Hiraku the holy lance and sending him to the dangerous forest of death. She points out that the weapon usually drains a human's life force instantly. The golden god defends himself by saying Hiraku is just using it as a farming tool. He also mentions that he gave Hiraku a super healthy body to handle the strain. The goddess then complains about the statue Hiraku made of her father. She is furious that it depicts him as an old man. She punishes the god by forcing him to sit in place for 300 years. A month later, a white-haired vampire named Flora arrives in the forest. Zabuton immediately captures her and ties her to a tree. Hiraku and Lou find her wrapped in webs. Flora reveals she is Lou's sister. She explains she came all the way out here to rescue Lou from Tia. She assumed the angel was holding Lou hostage. Lou clears up the misunderstanding and invites Flora to stay with them. Flora meets Hiraku and feels highly suspicious of him. She wonders how an ordinary human could be in charge of everything. She suddenly notices Kuro and realizes he is a legendary inferno wolf. She is absolutely terrified and quickly apologizes for her rude behavior. Hiraku serves everyone dinner to welcome Flora. He prepares a special dish using tofu and miso. Flora tries the food and is amazed by the unique flavors. Hiraku explains that he makes miso and soy sauce from fermented soybeans. Flora is completely shocked to hear they intentionally eat fermented food. Hiraku notes that people in this world have wine and cheese but do not understand the science behind it. He explains the concept of microscopic organisms causing fermentation. Flora becomes obsessed with the idea. She decides this is the perfect subject for her magical research. She abruptly leaves the village to gather her belongings so she can move in permanently. Another month passes and Flora returns to the forest. She brings a group of ogre maids with her to help around the village. The head maid Anne introduces herself and pledges their service. Flora also brings several cows to provide fresh milk. Hiraku is thrilled because he can finally make butter and cheese. Tia also returns from a trip and brings her angel subordinates Grandmaria, Kudel, and Koroni. She assigns them to patrol the skies and keep the village safe. Tia also brings a group of lizardmen led by Daga. The muscular lizardmen take over all the heavy outdoor labor. Daga even gifts Hiraku a live chicken, meaning they will soon have eggs. The village quickly grows more civilized. The ogre maids clean the houses spotless in record time. Hiraku teaches them advanced cooking methods like frying, braising, and steaming. They quickly master the techniques and prepare incredible meals like braised killer rabbit. The construction projects move much faster thanks to the lizardmen. Hiraku gives Daga a red scarf to wear so he can tell him apart from the others. He checks the population numbers and gets nervous about how fast the settlement is expanding. Suddenly, Leah arrives with a massive group of female elves. She explains she brought every surviving member of her tribe to live with them. She casually mentions there are no male elves left. The women are eager to start reproducing, which makes Hiraku incredibly uncomfortable. A few days later, Hiraku calls a meeting with all the group representatives. He tells Lou, Tia, and Daga, the elf leaders Kuro and Zabuton, that they need a name for their settlement. He points out that it started as a simple hut but has basically become a town. The girls suggest naming it after him. Hiraku immediately rejects the idea. He proposes naming it after the surrounding forest instead. The others inform him that they live in the forest of death. Hiraku quickly drops the idea since the village of death sounds cursed. He walks over to the lodge doors and pulls them open. He reveals the massive ancient trees standing in the center of the settlement. He decides they will call their home the Great Tree Village. Everyone loves the new name. Hiraku declares they are going to throw a massive party to celebrate the founding of their village. They build a giant bonfire and gather all the food they have. Hiraku surprises everyone by bringing out the very first batch of wine they made. He tells them to enjoy themselves and opens the barrels. The elves, angels, and lizardmen start drinking and feasting under the night sky. The girls start calling Hiraku the mayor. He initially tries to refuse the title. Flora tells him he is the only one qualified for the job. The entire crowd cheers for him and chants his new title. Hiraku finally gives in and accepts his role as the mayor of the Great Tree Village. He raises his hands and the celebration kicks into high gear. The animals quickly get completely drunk and pass out in the dirt. Flora rests her head on the table with a blissful smile after drinking too much wine. The elves dance around the fire and sing loudly. Hiraku sits at a picnic table with Lu and watches everyone have a good time. Lu blushes and tells him she is so happy that it all feels like a dream. Hiraku smiles warmly and agrees with her. He raises his wooden mug and toasts to the future of their new home. Lu clinks her mug against his. Flora suddenly jolts awake and yells that she wants to toast too. She demands another cup of wine from the maids. Everyone laughs and continues to drink together by the warm glow of the fire. In the time between winter and summer, the village population grows again. Hiraku settles into his role as the mayor of the newly named Great Tree Village. His daily routine stays mostly the same despite his new title. One day, a blonde angel flies down and alerts Hiraku that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived. Hiraku goes to the village entrance and meets a mustached man in a formal red suit. The man introduces himself as Beazle and requests an audience with the person in charge. Hiraku nervously steps forward and introduces himself as the mayor. Beazle immediately presents a magical green potion as a gift to commemorate their meeting. Hiraku accepts the almighty medicine and thanks him. Beazle then explains that he comes on behalf of the Demon Lord to discuss the status of the settlement. Hiraku worries that the Demon Lord might demand taxes for living on his land or even try to evict them. He briefly considers asking Lu and Tia for advice but decides he needs to handle his mayoral duties himself. Hiraku states that they are willing to offer part of their harvest as tax to prove they have no intention of rebelling against the Demon Lord. He tries to act tough and proposes a 10% tax rate. Beazle looks shocked for a moment but quickly agrees to the arrangement. They sign a formal contract making it official. Hiraku adds a condition that the tax only applies to the crops grown in their fields. He strictly excludes their milk, eggs, honey, and alcohol from the agreement. He tells Beazle that the Demon Lord's people must negotiate separate trades if they want any of those items. Beazle accepts these terms as well. Hiraku feels bad for negotiating so aggressively, so he gives Beazle a wrapped box of apples as a parting gift. After Beazle leaves, Hiraku asks Lu and Tia if he handled the situation correctly. Lu assures him that he did a great job. She explains that typical tax rates are usually around 50 or 60%. Hiraku is shocked to learn he got such a good deal. Tia adds that forcing the Demon Lord's people to collect the tax in person once a year forces them to officially recognize the village. She also points out that yearly collections prevent the demons from accurately measuring the village's total production. Hiraku realizes he just secured the Demon Lord's protection for an incredibly low price. Meanwhile, Beazle returns to the Demon Lord's dark castle and meets with the other demon generals, Gratz and Randon. They discuss the situation with the village. Gratz questions why Beazle allowed the village to submit with such a low tax rate. Randon suspects the villagers have an ulterior motive because they are strong enough to defeat a wyvern. Beazle breaks into a cold sweat and explains that he had no choice. He tells them that the vampire princess Lu and the angel of annihilation Tia were both present in the village. Gratz is stunned to hear that the great sage and the strongest angel live there. Beazle continues listing the threats, mentioning an army of high elves and a pack of inferno wolves. He also reveals that the killer angel trio guided him to the mayor. Beazle admits he thought his life was over when he saw their forces. Gratz finally understands how the village managed to take down a wyvern so easily. Beazle explains that he accepted the 10% tax just to keep them from becoming an enemy force. He considers it a massive victory that they managed to negotiate amicably at all. He then shows the other generals the wrapped gift Hiraku gave him. Randon panics and assumes the box is full of dangerous traps or poison. Beazle opens it to reveal the fresh apples. Randon decides they need to test the fruit for poison, so he takes a bite. He immediately shouts in surprise because the apple tastes incredibly delicious. However, Beazle inspects the white cloth used to wrap the apples and freezes in terror. He realizes the fabric is woven from the silk of a great demon spider. Randon remembers that a great demon spider once fought a previous demon lord to a standstill. The realization that the village harbors such a terrifying monster completely breaks Randon's spirit. He jumps out of his chair and screams that he is resigning from his position. A few days later, a colossal blue dragon with a green mane lands just outside the village. Hiraku, a lizardman and a maid stare in absolute shock at the massive beast. The dragon introduces himself as Drime, the one true ruler of the dragons. Drime bows his massive head to the group. A blonde man in a purple suit stands next to the dragon and presents a large gift box to Hiraku. Hiraku opens the box and finds an incredibly ornate and sharp magic sword inside. He thanks them for the expensive but somewhat violent gift. The blonde man introduces himself as Gucci, Drime's associate. He explains that Drime's lair is located in the mountains to the south. They consider the village their neighbors and came to offer a formal greeting. Hiraku appreciates the polite gesture and invites them inside the village. However, he points out that Drime is way too big to fit through the gates. Gucci agrees and asks Drime to transform into his smaller form. The dragon glows with blue magic and shrinks down into a middle-aged human man with long dark hair and a mustache. Drime formally introduces himself again in his human form. Hiraku invites them into the main lodge for a feast. Drime ends up drinking a massive amount of the village's wine. He gets completely drunk and shouts that he never wants to leave. He declares that he will live in the village and protect it from attackers. Gucci calmly tells Drime that his prolonged stay would be a nuisance to the villagers. Gucci forces the drunk dragon to leave while the villagers are still happy to have them as guests. Gucci also makes sure to take a large batch of apples with them before they depart. Hiraku watches the dragon fly away into the night sky and realizes he needs a better system for handling visitors. Hiraku gathers the elves to discuss the visitor situation. He explains that keeping guests waiting at the village entrance feels rude, but he also feels uncomfortable inviting strangers directly into their homes. He decides they need to build a dedicated guest house. He initially suggests building a small house that can fit 4 people. The elves immediately reject the idea. They point out that anyone traveling through the dangerous forest and mountains will likely travel in large groups. They suggest building a guest house large enough to comfortably fit 30 people. Hiraku agrees to the plan. They design a large 2-story wooden building. The first floor features a massive open space designed for hosting feasts. The second floor contains several bedrooms for the guests to sleep in. The female elves quickly gather their tools and construct the new guest house in a forest clearing. Next, Hiraku decides to change how they greet people. Previously, the angels would spot visitors and capture them by force. Alternatively, Zabuton the giant spider would sound a terrifying battle alarm, causing everyone in the village to grab their weapons and rush to the gates. Hiraku thinks this aggressive approach is terrible for hospitality. The elves craft a normal silver bell and hang it from a tree to serve as a proper visitor alarm. Hiraku then suggests that he, Lu, and Tia should form a small welcoming committee. The girls reject this idea as well. They warn him that enemies might try to sneak into the village disguised as friendly visitors. They insist on forming a large, heavily armed welcoming party. The new group includes high elves, ogre maids, and muscular lizardmen. Flora the vampire also volunteers to join the security team. She offers to keep watch over the visitors throughout the entire night. Hiraku learns that vampires can go several days without sleeping, without any issues. He accepts her help but tells her not to overdo it. The new preparations are put to the test much sooner than Hiraku expects. The silver bell rings, signaling the arrival of visitors. A group of 4 beastmen with wolf ears and travel gear stands at the edge of the forest. The leader of the group is a purple-haired beastman named Gulf. He introduces his group and explains that they come from Howling Village, a settlement located in the eastern mountains. He states that they want to establish relations with Great Tree Village. Tia steps forward and welcomes them. She notes that their journey must have been tough. She offers to guide them to the new guest house so they can rest. However, she asks Gulf if the 4 of them are the only members of their group. Gulf confirms that they are. Tia's expression turns deadly serious. She states that the village will treat any remaining stragglers as enemy combatants. Gulf breaks into a nervous sweat. He realizes they cannot fool the villagers. He calls out to the woods, and several more beastmen emerge from their hiding spots. The stragglers have their hands raised in surrender because Kuro's wolves have already surrounded them. Tia smiles and lectures Gulf about keeping his entire group together. She warns him to behave because the village is full of incredibly dangerous residents. Gulf promises to follow their rules. Tia leads the beastmen to the new guest house. The beastmen are amazed by the beautiful wooden building. The ogre maids line up and bow respectfully to welcome them. The beastmen cheer in excitement as they take their seats at the tables. Hiraku watches from the doorway and feels proud of their new hospitality system. However, Tia pulls Hiraku aside and points out a major issue. She notes that the beastmen did not bring any offerings or gifts with them. She explains that visitors seeking relations always bring a gift, just like Drime did with the magic sword. Tia suspects the beastmen might not be entirely friendly. She decides to lower their hospitality level as a precaution. Hiraku feels bad about this decision. He watches the maids serve the beastmen a very basic meal of plain bread and raw vegetables. Hiraku wants to offer them wine, but the maids and elves strictly oppose the idea. Hiraku forces the issue and demands they serve wine anyway. The girls compromise and allow exactly 2 cups of wine per person. The beastmen happily drink the wine and praise the food, but Hiraku still feels guilty for offering such a meager feast. He approaches Gulf's table to find out more about their visitors. Hiraku asks what kind of place Howling Village is. Gulf laughs and explains that it is a 500-year-old village made up of 5 small settlements. The population mostly consists of beastmen who make a living by hunting and mining ore. Gulf reveals that they usually survive by trading with a human village across the mountains. Unfortunately, the human village is experiencing trouble, making their trade relationship very unstable. Howling Village desperately needs a new trading partner to survive. Hiraku asks how they managed to find Great Tree Village in the middle of the dangerous forest. Gulf explains that they heard about the settlement from one of the Demon Lord's associates. Gulf admits they hid their extra members outside the village as a standard precaution when visiting a new place. He also notes that the hidden members could run back and warn their village if things went wrong. Hiraku praises Tia for spotting the hidden guards and gathering valuable information. Hiraku and Gulf sit down to finalize a trade agreement. Gulf states that they are not interested in a normal economic trade system. Howling Village does not use currency at all. They prefer an open market system where they physically exchange goods. Hiraku smiles and admits that Great Tree Village does not use currency yet either. Gulf asks if the Great Tree villagers can travel to Howling Village to conduct the trades. He explains that carrying heavy goods all the way through the forest is too difficult for his people. Hiraku considers the long distance and realizes the journey would be tough for his people as well. However, he suddenly remembers that he has an entire pack of giant wolves. He decides he can use Kuro and the other wolves to carry the heavy cargo. Hiraku agrees to transport the goods to Howling Village. He asks Gulf what items they want to trade. Gulf lists off goods made from their mined ore, including paints, silverware, glassworks, and metalworks. Hiraku gets incredibly excited and shouts that he wants all of those items. In exchange, Gulf asks for foodstuffs. Hiraku immediately agrees to bring their harvested crops to trade. Hiraku then apologizes to Gulf regarding the gift situation. He admits he did not know about the custom of bringing gifts until recently. He tells Gulf not to worry about it. Gulf looks relieved and promises to bring a gift next time, though he warns that their village is poor. Hiraku reassures him that the thought behind the gift is more important than its value. When it is time for the first trade run, Hiraku prepares to lead the expedition. However, the girls refuse to let him go. They explain that sending the mayor on the very first diplomatic mission makes the village look weak. The girls draw lots to decide who will go in his place. Tia wins the lottery and agrees to act as the village representative. To make the journey easier, Drime the dragon agrees to fly Tia, the lizardman, and the cargo all the way to Howling Village. In exchange, Hiraku gives Drime an entire barrel of wine. Several days later, Tia and the lizardmen return to the village. Hiraku greets them and asks how the trade went. Tia reports that the trip was a massive success. They managed to exchange everything they brought, and the beastmen loved all the food. Tia explains that the beastmen were hesitant at first. She used a tactic Hiraku taught her and handed out free samples of fruit. A massive crowd quickly gathered around them. The beastmen were so eager to trade that they even bought the wine meant for Tia's personal stash. Hiraku laughs and promises to let her drink even more wine at dinner. Tia then delivers some surprising news. The mayor of Howling Village asked if some of their people could move to Great Tree Village permanently. Hiraku knows they desperately need more workers, so he happily agrees to take them. Tia mentions that 20 people want to migrate, and all of them are young women. Hiraku realizes this is a huge problem. He notes that Great Tree Village is suffering from a massive gender imbalance. The population is almost entirely female, and they desperately need more men for the future of the village. Hiraku accepts the female migrants but adds a strict condition. He tells Tia they must send at least 2 young men along with the women. Tia understands and relays the message. A short time later, the new migrants arrive at the village. A beastkin girl with orange hair and red facial markings steps forward to introduce herself. She says her name is Senna and thanks Hiraku for accepting them. Senna looks incredibly nervous and breaks into a heavy sweat. She begs Hiraku not to abandon them and promises they are ready to be used however he sees fit. Hiraku is slightly taken aback by her extreme mental preparation. He assures her that they have beds ready for everyone. He tells Senna and the others to take their time getting acclimated to their new daily life. He explicitly promises that he will not kick them out. Senna smiles brightly and thanks him profusely. Hiraku then asks about the men he requested. He wants to confirm that the male migrants actually made the trip. Senna proudly confirms that they brought 3 males with them. She steps aside and presents the 3 males to the group. Hiraku stares in pure shock. The 3 males are literally young children. One is a purple-haired beastkin boy, another is a blonde beastkin boy, and the third is a brown-haired human boy. They look up at Hiraku with wide, curious eyes. The adult elves gather around and stare at the children with contemplative expressions. They realize they cannot use the boys for anything right now. The elves discuss the situation and decide they will just have to wait 5 or 10 years for the boys to grow up. Hiraku looks at the small children and places the entire future of the village on their tiny shoulders. Lemulius takes on the role of housing manager and helps the newly arrived Beastman girls settle in. The girls are initially terrified because they assume they will be treated horribly as newcomers, but Lemulius quickly assures them that no one has any bad intentions. However, a different problem arises shortly after they move in. The Beastman girls keep fainting randomly throughout the day. Hiraku soon realizes that they are just passing out from pure fear every time they see Zabuton the giant spider or Kuro's pack of wolves. He decides they will just have to get used to living around such high-tier monsters. A few days later, Hiraku watches Senna play with the children and notices her using magic to catch a toy. He is completely shocked and asks if she can use magic. Senna confirms that she can, which makes Hiraku realize that he might be the only person in the entire village without any magical abilities. He talks to Tia about it, and she points out that all the angels can naturally use magic. The High Elves also chime in, demonstrating how they easily use water and fire magic for their daily farming chores. Hiraku then observes the village animals and is stunned to see Zabuton using magic rings, the wolves extinguishing magical flames, and even the small bees and slimes using magic to multiply or fly. Senna tries to comfort Hiraku by saying they can practice together, but he feels completely inadequate and figures even the children will surpass him soon. He decides to stop worrying about the impossible and just focus on his farming. Suddenly, a massive earthquake shakes the entire village. Tia rushes over to Hiraku and reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting each other in the northern forest. Hiraku is amazed that their fight is causing the ground to shake so violently. Tia worries that the battle might destroy the village and warns against getting involved without a plan. However, Hiraku only wonders if the monsters taste good. He asks Tia to fly him up so they can get a better look. Tia carries him into the sky, and they spot the massive beasts tearing each other apart. Tia suggests they go back for backup, but Hiraku tells her to just drop him down really fast. He falls from the sky and completely obliterates both monsters with his farming tool before they can even react. The High Elves are amazed that Hiraku can take down such powerful beasts with a single strike. Hiraku drags the massive carcasses back to the village and immediately starts cooking. He chops up the bear meat and braises it in a large pot with red wine and vegetables. The maids panic because he is using their precious wine for cooking, but Hiraku insists it is completely normal. He tastes the bear stew but finds the meat incredibly gamey and tough. Next, he decides to slice up the snake meat and deep fry it. The girls try the fried snake and are completely blown away by the taste, comparing it to delicious fried chicken. Hiraku tastes it and agrees, but he feels like the dish is missing a side of mayonnaise. He heads to Flora's laboratory to ask for an antibacterial agent so he can safely make mayonnaise with raw eggs. Flora excitedly shows him a pink potion, claiming it can blast anything over the mountains, but Hiraku asks for something less explosive and safe for food. Flora hands him a clear liquid that works perfectly. Hiraku then asks Flora how her miso production is going. She complains that her soybeans never fermented, and she ended up blowing up her hut 3 times trying to fix it. Hiraku realizes she failed because she did not use his farming tool and chant the specific words to create the mold. He promises to help her try again later. Hiraku takes the clear medicine and goes back to the kitchen to make mayonnaise. He mixes raw eggs, apple vinegar, salt and oil in a large bowl, whisking it until it turns into a thick cream. He serves the fresh mayonnaise with the fried snake, and Flora loves it so much she tries to eat it straight from the bowl. Hiraku scolds her for being unhealthy and moves on to his next project. He and Flora boil soybeans, mash them in a mortar, mix them with salt and mold, and pack the paste into wooden barrels to age in the cellar. Flora is shocked that it will take several months for the miso to ferment, but Hiraku explains that the wait will make the flavor much richer. Just as they finish, Lemulius runs in to announce that some visitors have arrived. Hiraku goes to the main hall and meets a group of 3 elder dwarves, led by a man named Donovan. Donovan explains that they traveled a long way because they heard the village produces high-quality alcohol. He asks Hiraku to share some with them, but Hiraku hesitates to give away their valuable wine for free. Donovan admits they have no money but offers their advanced brewing technology in exchange. He promises to help turn the village's crops into incredible alcohol. Hiraku immediately accepts the deal. Donovan and his men get to work right away, using the village's harvested corn and a copper distillation apparatus to create strong corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a sip of the clear liquid and instantly turns red from the intense alcohol content. Donovan laughs and calls him a lightweight. The dwarves decide to stay in the village permanently as the official brewers. To celebrate the arrival of the beastmen and the dwarves, Hiraku throws a massive welcome party in the banquet hall. Everyone drinks the new alcohol and eats vegetables dipped in mayonnaise. A random man sneaks into the party to drink, but he gets tied up and dragged away by one of the guards. During the feast, Donovan thanks Hiraku for taking his group in. Hiraku tells him not to worry about it, and then quietly asks Donovan if any of the girls in the village catch his eye. Donovan strokes his beard and says the girls are all very pretty, but they are far too young for him. He states that he cannot be attracted to a woman unless she can grow a full beard. Hiraku is completely creeped out by the cultural difference and decides to drop the subject. The next day, Hiraku is out chopping wood when he suddenly sees 3 dragons flying toward the village. One is a massive black dragon that looks extremely aggressive. Hiraku raises his farming tool, determined to shoot it down before it destroys the village. He launches a massive beam of magic into the sky, but the black dragon barely dodges it. Drime, the blue dragon, suddenly appears in his human form alongside his associate Gucci. Drime desperately begs Hiraku to stop attacking. Drime introduces the black dragon as his wife, Grafaloon, and the smaller dragon as his daughter, Lastasmoon. Hiraku is confused about why they are attacking. Gucci explains that Drime kept sneaking out of his castle in the middle of the night to visit the village. Grafaloon noticed him taking massive amounts of treasure from their vault and staying out until dawn, so she assumed he was having an affair. She came to the village to obliterate his supposed mistress. Drime tries to defend himself, claiming it was all high-level diplomacy, but his wife refuses to believe him until she sees the village for herself. They quickly realize Drime was just bringing diplomatic gifts to trade for the village's crops and alcohol. Grafaloon apologizes to Hiraku for almost burning the village down over a misunderstanding. Hiraku accepts the apology, but Grafaloon is secretly terrified. She realizes Hiraku's magic attack was so powerful that she barely escaped with her life. She knows the village has enough military might to challenge the dragon race, so she decides they need to monitor Hiraku closely. Grafaloon orders Lastasmoon to stay in the village and act as a diplomat to ensure Hiraku never turns his power against the dragons. Lastasmoon agrees and introduces herself to Hiraku, asking him to call her Lasty. Hiraku assigns her to help the beastmen harvest tomatoes in the garden. However, Lasty's immense dragon strength causes her to accidentally crush the crops. Hiraku then assigns her to wash dishes, but she easily shatters every plate she touches. She even tries to use magic on the fruit trees and ends up blowing them up. Hiraku realizes Lasty is not suited for physical labor. To make matters worse, her presence terrifies the village cows and chickens so much that they stop producing milk and eggs. Hiraku decides to make her the official diplomatic relations manager so she can handle outside merchants. A mustached merchant arrives at the guest house to buy fruit. He asks for oranges, but Lasty tells him they are out of stock. She aggressively offers him strawberries, apples, and watermelons instead. When the merchant hesitates, Lasty transforms into her massive dragon form right in front of him to show how ripe the fruit is. The merchant is absolutely terrified and agrees to buy 10 boxes of everything just to survive the encounter. Lasty handles the transaction perfectly, and Hiraku praises her for getting the hang of her new job. Meanwhile, deep in the demonic kingdom, the Demon Lord's Council holds an emergency meeting. They are in pure panic because they just received word that legendary dragons are now living in Hiraku's village. The generals realize the village's military power is growing out of control. They decide they need to send a spy immediately, but they know anyone caught will trigger an all-out war. Beasel's daughter, Florem, steps into the room and volunteers for the mission. Her father begs her not to do anything rash, but Florem is highly confident in her magical abilities and promises to be careful. Florem flies to the village and looks down from the sky, thinking it looks like an ordinary farming settlement. She lands at the front gates and is immediately greeted by Lasty. Florem instantly recognizes the infamous dragon and completely freezes in terror. Lasty excuses herself to deal with an arriving messenger, leaving Florem alone to explore the village. Florem seizes the opportunity to analyze their military strength. She peeks around the corners and is horrified by what she sees. She spots the muscular lizardmen, ogre maids, and elder dwarves. She then finds Lulusi, the vampire princess, working in a laboratory. Next, she sees Tia and the trio of killer angels guarding the skies. Florem hides behind a fence and spots a group of high elves, recalling horrifying rumors about them kidnapping men. Suddenly, a pack of inferno wolves and demon spiders drop from the trees around her. Florem realizes the village is packed with the most dangerous monsters in the world. Her confidence as a magic user completely shatters. She pulls out her map and tries to figure out who could possibly lead such a terrifying army. She assumes Lasti must be the commander, but her notes mention a mysterious mayor who rules over everyone. As she walks through the woods, she runs into Hiraku carrying a bundle of plants. Florem assumes he is just a weak, ordinary human and rudely tells him to leave her alone because she does not need help from someone like him. Hiraku is confused by her attitude and walks away. Later, Florem goes to the guest house and talks to Lasti. Lasti mentions that the human Florem just met is actually the mayor who defeated her mother in combat. Florem completely breaks down in a panic, realizing she just insulted the most powerful being in the entire village. To avoid being killed for her disrespect, Florem uses her magic to transform into a small child and starts working in the cabbage fields to blend in. Hiraku walks by the garden and learns that Bezel's daughter is living in the village and helping out with the harvest. He happily accepts her presence, completely unaware of her true mission. One day, Tia notices that the slime she brought to the village to purify the wastewater has unexpectedly multiplied. There are now many different types of slimes in various colors like red, yellow, green, and black bouncing around the village. They seem completely harmless until a red slime sneaks into the storage room and drinks an entire barrel of the village's precious alcohol. The alcohol-loving residents, including Lulusi and the elves, are absolutely furious and immediately put the slime on trial. They suggest severe punishments like burning it, drying it out in the sun, or locking it in confinement. Hiraku steps in and points out that it is just a simple slime and punishing it won't make it reflect on its actions. He acquits the slime of all charges, and from then on, the slime happily joins the villagers during their feasts and celebrations. Autumn arrives, bringing cooler weather and a bountiful harvest of cabbage, radishes, carrots, and sweet potatoes. Hiraku uses the fresh crops to prepare a massive mushroom and vegetable hot pot for everyone to enjoy. While they eat the hearty soup, Hiraku mentions that the hot pot would taste even better if they had seafood like cod, crabs, or monkfish. He also explains that they could make a delicious chanko hot pot if they had kombu to make broth. The residents have no idea what seafood is, but after Hiraku explains the concept, Lulusi and the elves get super motivated and immediately start researching ocean products. Since the village has no access to the ocean, Florem mentions a port city called Shashato in the demonic kingdom that handles marine trading. Lasti volunteers to fly Florem over to the city to negotiate with a merchant she knows. 3 days later, Michael Goraun, the president of a major trading company from Shashato, arrives at the village. He presents several crates of fresh fish and the kombu that Hiraku requested, explaining that fishermen usually just throw the seaweed back into the ocean. Michael outlines his 3 main goals for the visit. First, he wants to properly greet Hiraku and thank him for the business. Second, he wants to suggest more trading opportunities between them. Finally, he requests to become the official government purveyor for the village, which means he would exclusively handle all their outside trade. Hiraku and the girls listen as Michael promises to secure several times more value for their enticing crops. They are just about to agree and discuss trading the village's alcohol next, but Drimes suddenly looms directly behind Michael and fiercely roars that he cannot have their alcohol. Terrified for his life, Michael politely excuses himself and immediately flees the village on the back of a green dragon. The group agrees that Michael seems like a skilled merchant and hopes their relationship goes smoothly. It turns out that 3 days earlier in Shashato, Michael was extremely busy in his office when his assistant informed him that some visitors arrived without an appointment. Michael felt a sudden wave of danger from his merchant's intuition but decided to meet them anyway. Lasti, Florem, and a muscular lizard man walked into his office. Michael recognized Florem as the daughter of the powerful Chrome family and immediately recognized Lasti as a highly dangerous dragon. He realized that dealing with them posed a massive risk to his business and life. Lasti asked him to purchase their goods and locate the ocean products Hiraku wanted. Michael was hesitant until Lasti pulled back a cloth to reveal baskets filled with incredibly high-quality red apples. Realizing that the massive profit completely outweighed the danger, Michael excitedly accepted the deal and ordered his men to gather the best seafood from the port. He decided to handle the delivery himself and rode on the back of a winged lizard man all the way to the Forest of Death. During the flight and upon arriving at the village, Michael was absolutely terrified by everything he saw. He spotted the giant demon, spiders, the killer angels patrolling the skies, the vampire princess, and the ancient dragons. Despite nearly dying from the overwhelming stress and fear, Michael believed the incredible profits were worth the nightmare. Back in the present, Hiraku happily eats the real seafood hot pot and plans to ask Michael for shrimp and squid the next time they trade. A few days later, a massive white dragon attacks the village. The angel squad spots the dragon but fails to stop it from flying over the forest. Hiraku watches the dragon hovering in the sky and acting extremely smug, so he decides to handle it himself. He throws a wooden spear with incredible force and strikes the dragon directly in the head, sending it crashing down into the trees. Hiraku goes to the crash site and finds a white-haired girl surrounded by Kuro's wolves. She tries to surrender and play it off as a joke, but Hiraku demands to know why she burned the forest. Drime and his associate Gucci suddenly arrive and frantically apologize. Drime explains that the girl is his older sister, Hakuren. Hakuren reveals that she came to the village to vent her anger because of something Drime said while drinking. Drime had casually mentioned that he wanted to marry his daughter Lasti off to the village mayor one day. Since Lasti is 900 years younger than Hakuren, Hakuren was absolutely furious at the idea that her niece might find a husband before her. Hiraku gives Hakuren a firm pat on the head and orders her to clean up the mess she made in the forest before she can do anything else. That night, Hakuren stays for dinner and quickly fits in with the rest of the village. She wants to play a game with the square tiles, so they set up a game of mahjong. Since nobody has anything of value to bet, Drime suggests playing strip mahjong as a punishment for the loser so they can taste humiliation. Hiraku doesn't want to force anyone into it, but Lasti brags that dragons never lose, and Hakuren confidently agrees. The high-stakes game begins and Hiraku quickly goes on a massive losing streak. Down to his last piece of clothing, he panics and suspects the dragons are using telekinesis or magic to rewrite the tiles. Hakuren shows him a blank tile, and Hiraku realizes he is just overthinking things and naturally has terrible luck. He finally gets a chance to score a massive double Yakuman and end the game, but he draws the exact tile he doesn't need. Hakuren immediately calls out a winning hand and defeats him completely. Having lost the game, Hakuren and the other girls start chanting for Hiraku to take his pants off. Hiraku solemnly accepts his humiliating defeat and nervously adjusts his pants as the girls cheer. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, the generals hold a serious meeting. Demon Lord Galgardo sits on his throne and complains that his daughter Yuri is going through a rebellious phase and barely speaks to him. Beelzebub redirects the conversation to the terrifying news that the ancient dragon Hakuren has also joined the village. They panic, realizing the village now possesses enough military power to conquer an entire country. They assume the village is convincing Florim to stay there, so they can use her as a hostage against the demonic kingdom. The pressure becomes too much for General Randan, who instantly writes a resignation letter, leaves it on his desk, and runs away from the castle. Back in the village, Hakuren decides to stay for the time being. However, she constantly complains about having to do any physical labor. Hiraku orders her to dig holes and fill them back in, but she gives up on the very first day. The maids discover that Hakuren is surprisingly skilled at tasks like peeling and carving apples, but she still hates working. Hiraku eventually assigns her to be the official village teacher. She stands in front of a classroom full of animal-eared children and teaches them reading, writing, and math using drawings of apples. Hakuren takes the job, but her only real motivation is to teach the kids to work hard so she won't have to do any chores herself in the future. Later, 3 topless Lamia girls arrive at the village and submissively present a sword, a chest, and magic crystals to Hiraku. They beg him to spare their lives, which completely confuses him. They explain that Kuro's wolf pups recently entered a dungeon near their home and cleared it out, which terrified the Lamia and forced them to flee from the area. Hiraku decides to help them by trading the village's crops for the magical crystals the Lamia mined. He also awkwardly asks the Lamia girls to put some clothes on when they visit, as their topless appearance makes it hard for him not to stare. The Lamia happily agree to the trade and cover themselves with white cloths. They quickly form the Lamia delivery service, using their strength to transport large crates and baskets of goods through the forest for the village. With the new delivery system in place and trade increasing with other cities, Hiraku plans to expand their agricultural fields even further. At the same time, deep inside the Demon Lord's castle, Princess Yuri holds a private meeting with her advisors in her tower. They discuss the growing threat and conclude that the village is actively amassing military might and holding Florim captive for a foul purpose. Yuri sits on her golden throne and firmly resolves to gather all their troops to defeat the village and save Florim. Back at the demonic kingdom, Princess Yuri and her noble followers, Rosalind, Klakasi, and Roaju, are completely convinced that the village is holding Florim captive and plotting a foul scheme against their nation. Yuri sits on her golden throne and officially orders her troops to prepare for a massive military campaign against the village so she can rescue her friend. Meanwhile, Florim learns about this absurd plan from Bezel and is completely shocked by the news. Bezel explains that while Florim was away, the three politically powerful nobles took the opportunity to fill Yuri's head with half-truths and manipulate her. Florim is incredibly frustrated because she already sent plenty of detailed reports to the demonic kingdom explaining exactly how ridiculously powerful the village is. Bezel assumes the reports sounded so unrealistic that the nobles simply ignored them and chose to believe their own delusions instead. Since Yuri plans to launch her attack the very next day with an army of 300 men, Bezel asks Florim to intercept them. He wants her to show the nobles the overwhelming difference in military might without actually mobilizing the village's main forces, warning that a full-scale retaliation would likely result in the total destruction of the demonic kingdom. Florim agrees to the plan and heads out to stop the invasion. The next day, Yuri's army marches toward the village, but Florim completely halts their advance alongside Lulusi and Tia. The three girls easily obliterate the surrounding landscape with a massive magic beam and casually toss giant tree trunks around like twigs to show off their raw physical strength. The terrified soldiers immediately surrender and beg for their lives on their knees. After completely crushing their spirits and receiving 10 boxes of apples as an apology, Florim brings Rosalind, Klakasi, and Roaju back to the village. She presents them to Hiraku while they stand frozen in absolute terror with completely pale faces. Florim casually lies to Hiraku, claiming the girls had a complete change of heart and are eager to work themselves to death handling the village's office work. Hiraku is bewildered by their traumatized expressions but agrees to take them in. Florim strictly warns Hiraku that he can dispose of them if they ever cause trouble, which makes Hiraku think she sounds incredibly scary. Florim also introduces Princess Yuri to him, pretending she is just an acquaintance who wants to observe the village for a while. Hiraku agrees to let Yuri tour the area and puts Florim in charge of showing them around. Before the tour begins, Florim strictly warns Yuri and the three nobles not to reveal their true identities to anyone and tells them to work honestly if they want their transgressions forgiven. Yuri happily accepts the condition, claiming she is glad to be treated like a normal person for once instead of a princess. During the tour, Yuri and the nobles are absolutely amazed by the village's advanced farming methods. They are surprised to learn that grapes are used to make alcohol, and they stare in awe at crops growing directly out of flooded fields. They also inspect the massive water wheel and are shocked to discover that it operates purely on water power instead of magic. Yuri takes a moment to play with the fluffy beastkin children, thoroughly enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. However, as they walk through the sun-drenched apple orchard, the three nobles greedily whisper among themselves. They plot to eventually take over the village, believing it could become the biggest moneymaker for the demonic kingdom. Their scheming is cut short when a nearby elf girl overhears them and gets highly annoyed, silently threatening to dispose of them. The girls panic and quickly abandon their devious thoughts. Despite their fear, the three nobles secretly plan to escape the village later that night. They wait in their lodge until dark, complaining about being noble women, forced to live in a rustic cabin in the middle of nowhere. Under the cover of night, they sneak out but immediately run into two of Kuro's massive horned wolves staring at them with glowing red eyes. The girls scream in terror, only to be blasted by a blinding wave of magical energy from Zabuton, the giant spider. The terrifying encounter completely breaks their spirits and knocks them unconscious. The next morning, they eagerly throw themselves into doing all the village's paperwork, desperately promising Hiraku and Florim that they will never cause trouble again. Florim is thrilled to finally have some reliable help with her massive mountain of office work and decides to officially name them the Town Hall Girls. Later, Yuri watches in shock as Florim casually plays fetch with an inferno wolf pup. Yuri admits to Florim that she was completely ignorant of the outside world and deeply regrets trying to bring war to such a wonderfully peaceful place. Florim agrees, stating that anyone attacking the village would simply be incinerated by a dragon's fire breath. Yuri then gets emotional and aggressively confronts Florim, blaming her for suddenly disappearing from the demonic kingdom and treating her like a stranger by calling her formal titles. Yuri tearfully confesses that she only acted out because she thought Florim had been taken hostage and wanted to save her childhood friend. Florim feels terrible for making Yuri worry and warmly apologizes, promising to keep her in the loop from now on. The two friends happily make up and head back to the lodge to eat. Over the next few weeks, Yuri completely immerses herself in village life. She enthusiastically joins the Beastkin children in harvesting golden wheat, digging up massive root vegetables, and enjoying hearty bowls of stew and rice. Meanwhile, the three town hall girls fully adapt to their new lives. They fall in love with the delicious food and the relaxing hot baths, totally enjoying their absolute freedom from the stressful political conflicts back home. Eventually, Yuri decides it is time to return to the demonic kingdom. She politely thanks Hiraku and the villagers for their hospitality, receiving a large basket of freshly baked bread and biscuits as a parting gift. When she asks the town hall girls if they are coming with her, the three nobles stubbornly refuse. With puffed cheeks and snacks in their hands, they claim they still have much to learn and want to repay the village's kindness by doing more office work. Yuri bids everyone farewell and teleports back home. Back at the demonic kingdom, Demon Lord Galgardo furiously complains to Beezle that Yuri has grown incredibly distant and barely speaks to him anymore. He wildly assumes she must have met a man in the village and throws a massive tantrum, triggering a pillar of dark magic as he vows to tear the guy apart. Beezle calmly reassures him that Yuri is simply growing up and taking a serious interest in politics. He urges the Demon Lord to calm down and act like a cool father instead of throwing embarrassing fits. Meanwhile, the village begins its pre-winter harvest and yields an unimaginably massive amount of crops, completely overflowing the storage shelves with giant radishes. Hiraku is thrilled by the bountiful harvest, and Hakuren suggests sending the extra food to her father Doraim. Hiraku agrees and also plans to send crops to the dragon grandparents, Doze and Raymalin, as well as the merchant Michael in Shishato City. Lasty happily volunteers to deliver the goods to Michael. When she arrives at Shishato City, Michael asks her to deal with a giant sea monster called a Chanko that has been relentlessly attacking his trade ships. Lasty effortlessly obliterates the monster with a massive magic beam from the sky and proudly brings the valuable Chanko meat back to the village. Hiraku uses the exotic meat to make a delicious seafood hotpot for everyone to enjoy. At the same time, Hakuren returns from delivering crops to the northern continent and brings a group of dark-skinned mountain elves with her. The group's leader, Ya, explains that food has become incredibly scarce in the mountains, so Hakuren invited them to live in the village. Hiraku warmly welcomes them and promises to help them build houses, though he accidentally calls them dark elves before Ya corrects him, clarifying they are mountain elves who use fire and eat meat. Eager to prove their worth to the village, the mountain elves confidently declare themselves excellent hunters and immediately set out into the forest to catch some food. However, their hunting trip is an absolute disaster as they comically fall into their own rope nets and boar traps, repeatedly getting launched into the air and failing to catch a single thing. Feeling terribly guilty about being a burden, Ya tries to make up for her failure by crafting pottery for the village using the local soil. Hiraku helps her build a small kiln, but the clay immediately cracks and shatters into useless ash when fired. Refusing to give up, Ya volunteers to search the surrounding forest for proper clay, relying on her mountain instincts to find the right earth. Her search is a massive success, and she eventually crafts a large batch of beautiful pottery jars, cups, and plates, making Hiraku incredibly happy to finally have proper dishware. Shortly after, the village's survey team, consisting of the elf girls, lizardmen, and wolves, returns from exploring a newly discovered dungeon up north. The elf girls report that they found a dangerous blood viper inside and fiercely demand permission from Hiraku to hunt it down immediately. They enthusiastically explain that blood viper meat is incredibly valuable because it dramatically improves vitality, enhances husband-wife relations, and blesses couples with children. Hearing this makes Hiraku extremely nervous, as all the elf girls are clearly eager to feed him the meat so they can have his children. Sweating nervously, he quickly suggests discussing the hunt with the whole village before making any rash decisions. As autumn fades and the cold winter approaches, the newly constructed men's bathhouse is finally completed. Hiraku happily relaxes in the steamy water alongside the beastkin children, glad to have a place for himself, the dwarves and the lizardmen to unwind. However, his peaceful soak is interrupted when several female maids suddenly barge into the bathhouse corridors carrying wooden tubs, hoping to wash his back and get closer to him romantically. Florim catches them in the act and fiercely scolds them, terrifying the maids as she strictly warns them that the lowest-ranking members of the village cannot just sneak their way to the top of the hierarchy. A few days later, Lulusi suddenly falls ill and becomes bedridden with nausea and a slight fever. Hiraku is totally shocked to see the powerful vampire so sick and quickly rushes to her cabin with Florem and Senna to check on her health. Lulusi tries to brush it off as a simple cold, mentioning that she has lost her appetite but is still intensely craving sour foods like tomatoes. Senna suddenly remembers that a woman in Howling Village had the exact same symptoms a while ago. When Hiraku asks what happened to that woman, Senna happily replies that everyone simply congratulated her on having a baby. Lulusi remains completely oblivious to the implication, still thinking she just caught a mild sickness, but Hiraku instantly pieces the clues together. The shocking realization hits him like a truck, and he lets out a massive shout of surprise as it finally dawns on him that Lulusi is pregnant. Following the shocking realization that Lu is actually pregnant, the entire village goes into an absolute uproar of joy. Everyone is incredibly excited about the upcoming baby, and Hiraku makes sure to constantly check on Lu to ensure she is feeling completely fine. Lu finds his constant worrying a bit overbearing but appreciates his care, calmly explaining that her pregnancy is the reason she hasn't been able to transform into her smaller form lately. She remains the calmest person in the entire village about the whole situation, casually telling Hiraku that everything will work out perfectly. Hiraku is relieved by her confidence and decides to focus on his daily tasks. He mentions that he plans to check on the medicinal herb garden, and Lu playfully teases him for constantly asking if she will be alright on her own. He apologizes and gets back to his morning routine. Hiraku's daily life settles into a very comfortable schedule, starting every day once the sun has completely risen. He intentionally wakes up a bit later than Anne and the rest of the maids, because they always insist on waking up incredibly early to start their chores. Hiraku claims he sleeps in just to stay out of their way and absolutely refuses to admit that he is just being lazy. Every morning he meets with Anne in the kitchen for a daily report on the village's status. She informs him about a minor incident from the previous night, explaining that their plan to leave out a decoy barrel of wine successfully distracted a wine slime from infiltrating their main food storage. Hiraku is glad the plan worked, but Anne is still slightly annoyed that they let the creature sneak into the building at all. Because the village's population has grown so massively, they can no longer fit everyone into the dining hall at once, forcing them to split breakfast into 3 separate shifts. The first shift is for the early risers, and today's menu features a hearty soup made of daikon radish, spinach, and cabbage, along with some seared smoked killer rabbit. During this meal, Hiraku notices Flora looking completely exhausted. She has massive dark bags under her eyes and stares blankly at the wall while obsessively muttering about microorganisms. Hiraku asks if she has been sleeping at all, and Flora admits she has been staying up all night trying to perfect her miso fermentation process but hasn't made any real progress yet. She pulls out a flask of mysterious pink liquid, completely convinced she just needs to tweak the formula, but Hiraku begs her to stop and immediately get some sleep. The second breakfast shift is reserved strictly for the maids, who sit down to eat their fill after finishing their morning duties. Finally, the third shift covers anyone who didn't make it to the first 2, which usually just consists of Hakurin because she constantly oversleeps and stumbles out of bed late. Later in the day, Gran Maria approaches Hiraku to deliver a security report. She explains that a pack of 3 killer rabbits attempted to infiltrate the village the previous day, but Kuro and the Horned Wolves easily intercepted and eliminated them before they could cause any trouble. Hiraku is completely unfazed by the news, noting that the rabbits never seem to learn their lesson. However, he is actually quite happy about the attacks, because the village uses the rabbits for their daily meat supply, making the failed infiltrations extremely convenient for their food reserves. Hiraku reflects on the angels guarding the village, noting that while Gran Maria and the others act incredibly strict and composed on duty, they completely enter lazy mode on their days off. They absolutely refuse to do any household chores, relying entirely on Anne's maids to prepare their food, and forcing Daga and the lizardmen to wash all their laundry. Despite their laziness at home, Hiraku is deeply grateful for their presence because they work incredibly hard to keep the borders safe from monsters. After finishing his morning duties, Hiraku heads out to the massive agricultural fields to start his farm work. Since the village has expanded so much, checking on every single crop has become a tough job, but he feels an immense sense of satisfaction whenever he sees the giant eggplants, beans, and striped gourds fully matured and ready for harvest. Normal agricultural pests from his old world do not exist here, but he still has to deal with strange little fuzzy black spirits that live on the plants and eat the leaves. Thankfully, Zabuton's tiny spiderlings and the horned wolves easily spot the pests before they can cause any real damage. Whenever they find an infestation, Hiraku simply uses his almighty farming tool as a watering can to sprinkle the plants, and the magical water instantly eliminates the weird black bugs. While the extra villagers help tremendously with the general harvesting, Hiraku still handles all the heavy lifting of tilling new fields and planting new crops entirely by himself using his tool. He decides to start planting vibrant yellow tulips and white narcissus flowers around the village borders, figuring that adding some beautiful colors will make the settlement feel much more civilized. When he isn't farming, Hiraku uses the tool to craft various wooden items for the villagers, effortlessly shaping blocks and toys for the beastkin children, even though he has absolutely zero prior construction experience. He constantly thanks God for giving him such an incredibly versatile and powerful tool. During the afternoon, Hiraku takes a break to eat lunch with the High Elves, Florim, and the Lizardmen. Eating a midday meal is a completely foreign concept in this world, and the High Elves are still deeply traumatized by their past starvation. They constantly tremble in fear, worrying that the village will rapidly deplete its food reserves and kick them out for eating too much. Hiraku finds their paranoia amusing, but explicitly promises them that they will never have to worry about going hungry as long as they live under his care. During the meal, he handles a few quick administrative duties. Daga approaches him to report that the cows have given birth to new calves and asks for permission to increase their daily feed allotment, which Hiraku immediately approves. Florim then mentions that their crop storage rooms are nearing maximum capacity and suggests they contact the merchant Michael to sell off their excess produce. Hiraku agrees and tells her to coordinate the massive sale. After lunch, Hiraku occasionally joins the village's combat training sessions. Anne strongly advised everyone to hold regular practice just in case of an emergency, and Hiraku agrees that the exercise is great for everyone's health. He watches the horned girls and lizardmen fiercely spar with wooden swords, complaining that they need the workout so they don't get too fat to fit into their maid uniforms. Hiraku decides to test his own skills against a wooden training dummy, but he quickly realizes he is absolutely terrible with normal swords and daggers. However, when he transforms his almighty farming tool into a spear, he effortlessly unleashes a massive wave of magical energy that completely obliterates the upper half of the heavy wooden dummy. The sheer destructive power completely shocks the nearby elf girls, and Hiraku awkwardly admits he has no idea when he would ever need to use that much lethal force. As the sun sets, Hiraku wraps up his chores and heads to the dining hall for dinner. The maids serve a brand new recipe consisting of simmered killer rabbit coated in a sweet honey sauce. Hiraku takes a bite and is immediately taken aback by how overwhelmingly sweet it is, nervously pointing out that he would prefer they only serve dishes they are fully confident in. However, Anne glares at him with a terrifyingly dark expression and strictly reminds him that they absolutely cannot afford to waste any food. Intimidated by her intense aura, Hiraku quickly shuts up, forces a fake smile, and eats the entire meal while giving her a thumbs up. During dinner, the villagers also share important news. Florim reads a letter from Princess Yuri, who demands more apples and requests another custom dress from Zabuton. Hiraku feels bad and wants to tell Yuri to stop making so many selfish requests, but Florim reassures him that Zabuton is actually incredibly happy to weave more clothes. After eating, Hiraku heads to the newly constructed men's bathhouse. He relaxes in the steaming hot spring completely alone, incredibly grateful that he forced the village to build a separate bath so he wouldn't have to deal with the chaos of the women's bathhouse. Afterward, he heads back to his log cabin to get some sleep, but he immediately starts feeling extremely uneasy. He constantly feels intense stares watching him in his bedroom and finally shouts out for help in a panic. Suddenly, 4 elf girls pop their heads out of hidden trapdoors built into his floor, walls, and ceiling. Realizing their cover is blown, the girls quickly retreat back into the hidden compartments. Hiraku sighs in defeat. convince himself they are just trying to keep him safe, but he firmly decides to seal up all the hidden doors the very next morning. Meanwhile, Donovan and the dwarves are hard at work in the stone brewery. Contrary to the stereotype of drunk dwarves, they take their brewing incredibly seriously and absolutely refuse to drink on the job because it could cause a disaster. Donovan tests a new batch of clear booze but angrily declares it a complete failure because it just burns the throat without any good flavor. Instead of throwing it away, he marks the bottle and decides to distill it further to mix with fruit juices. Because the entire village consumes so much alcohol, Donovan tracks down Hiraku and demands he triple their current grape harvest. Hiraku is slightly overwhelmed by the massive request but agrees to see what he can do. Suddenly, Senna rushes into the clearing in an absolute panic, screaming that a strange man has infiltrated the village. Hiraku is completely baffled as to how anyone could bypass Gran Maria's aerial patrols and Zabaton's webs without being noticed. He rushes to the scene and finds a brown-haired man in a red coat prostrating himself in the dirt before the village's wooden shrine. Lulusi and Flora casually approach the man and cheerfully greet him as Vargrief, the progenitor of the vampires. Hiraku is totally shocked to learn that this youthful-looking guy is actually their grandfather. Vargrief explains that he is around 4,000 years old but manages to stay sane by constantly using magic to erase his own useless memories, keeping only the important details like his name and clan. He congratulates Lou on her pregnancy, noting that vampires usually only expand their families by forming new blood packs, making a natural child a highly treasured rarity. Vargrief then apologizes to Hiraku for sneaking into the village unannounced, explaining that he originally planned to just look around and leave. However, he was completely captivated by the presence of the wooden statue of the creator beneath the big tree. He reveals that he met God once when he was born, but had completely forgotten his exact appearance over the millennia until he saw Hiraku's incredibly accurate carving. Vargrief desperately wants to take the statue home, but Hiraku explains that it belongs to the village. Seeing Vargrief slump his head in massive disappointment, Hiraku kindly offers to carve him a brand new one. Vargrief is overjoyed and happily accepts the offer. Hiraku quickly uses his tool to carve a perfect replica of the deity, and Vargrief absolutely loves it. When Vargrief asks how much he owes for the masterpiece, Hiraku completely refuses to accept any money, stating that God is not something that should ever be sold. Vargrief respects his decision, ties the heavy wooden statue to his back, and bids everyone farewell. He returns to his massive sunlit cathedral in the outside world and meets with the elderly head priest. Vargrief orders the priest to enshrine Hiraku's carving in the absolute best spot in the entire temple. The priest points out that they would have to remove a deeply beloved masterpiece carved by a famous sculptor to make room, but Vargrief doesn't care at all and demands the change anyway. He strictly orders the priest to inform all the other temples to completely respect the Great Tree Village and quietly support Hiraku from the shadows so they don't disturb his peaceful life. Back at the village, Hiraku suddenly sneezes, completely unaware of the massive political strings Vargrief just pulled for him. A few days later, a massive delivery arrives at the village. Since Hiraku refused payment for the statue, Vargrief sends a breathtakingly ornate, black and gold grand piano as a celebration gift for Lou's pregnancy. Hiraku and the lizardmen carefully carry the massive instrument into the dining hall so everyone can enjoy it. The three town hall girls, Rosalind, Klakas, and Roaju, stare at the piano with wide eyes and completely panic. They recognize it as an incredibly rare and expensive artifact that is normally only used for massive ceremonies in high-ranking temples. When Hiraku casually invites them to be the first ones to play it, the three nobles completely break down. They start crying and sweating profusely, terrified that their lives will be completely over if they accidentally damage such a priceless item. They desperately beg Hiraku to procure a cheap, beat-up practice piano instead so they don't have to risk touching the progenitor's gift. Hiraku agrees and contacts Michael to buy a standard piano for them. Soon, both the ornate piano and the plain practice piano are set up side by side in the room. Florem and the Demon Kingdom girls are already incredibly skilled at playing, but the rest of the villagers happily take turns practicing on the new instrument to improve their skills. The dining hall is quickly filled with beautiful music, and Hiraku goes to sleep that night feeling completely satisfied with the wonderful community he has built. Spring arrives in the village, and the sun shines brighter each day, making the crops look incredibly vibrant. Hiraku works in the fields, checking on the eggplants, cucumbers, and tomatoes while trimming some of the taller plants. He feels much more knowledgeable about farming now compared to when he first started. Soon, it is time for a lunch break, and all the girls eagerly gather around the picnic blankets. Lu calls out to Hiraku, telling him to take a break too, but he admits he just cannot help himself when he looks at the crops. He joins Lu and the others, and Lu uses her ice magic to cool their drinks. Hiraku notes how revitalizing it is, though Lu warns him not to overwork himself. Hiraku brushes off her concern and instead asks if it is okay for her to be walking around so much now that she is heavily pregnant. Lu assures him she is fine and mentions that the other women in the village advised her to get some exercise to keep her body strong. She notes that the ogre maids have experience with childbirth, which is reassuring since she knows nothing about it herself. Hiraku looks at her growing belly and wonders aloud what it feels like to carry a child. The other girls gather around, curious about the weight, and Lu compares it to carrying 2 heads of cabbage. They all excitedly wonder if it will be a boy or a girl and offer to help her with anything she needs. Lu appreciates their kindness and says her appetite is back, but she admits the only thing truly bothering her is that she cannot drink any alcohol. Everyone groans in deep sympathy. Later, 3 of the Angel Knights, including Gran Maria, approach Hiraku with a desperate request. They formally beg him to sell off all the alcohol in the village. Hiraku is confused, and they explain that everyone in the village has decided to stop drinking in solidarity with Lu. However, abstaining is making them all incredibly miserable, especially during meals when they desperately crave a drink. They believe the only solution is to completely remove the temptation. Hiraku calmly explains that selling the alcohol would be a mistake because alcohol tastes much better the longer it is allowed to age. He encourages them to tough it out now so they can enjoy even better drinks later. The girls are relieved by this perspective and agree to hold out. Shortly after, Donovan and the dwarves approach Hiraku, looking extremely depressed. They ask if they did something wrong because no one in the village is drinking their alcohol anymore. Hiraku realizes they completely misunderstood the situation and explains that the villagers are just abstaining for Lu's sake, not because the alcohol is bad. Donovan is relieved, and Hiraku tells them to actually increase production so they will have plenty of aged wine ready for when everyone finally starts drinking again. The dwarves are thrilled and promise to work even harder to meet the upcoming demand. As Lu's due date approaches, she spends more time resting inside their cabin because the sun is getting too strong. Hiraku checks on her, and she points out a magical white flower that Tia and the angels brought her from a snowy mountain. The flower constantly releases cold air, keeping the room perfectly cool and comfortable. Soon, various villagers stop by to drop off gifts for the upcoming baby. Ya, the mountain elf, brings a jar of rare medicinal herbs meant to bring good health, insisting it is better to use it now than keep it in storage forever. Lasty drops off a glowing blue necklace from her father's treasure room that helps with magic recovery. Anne presents a beautifully made custard pudding topped with caramel sauce, while Lafa gifts Lu a lucky floral wreath. Zabuton and her spiderlings proudly show off a collection of tiny, colorful baby clothes they wove themselves. Daga, the lizard man, feels awkward because his species hatches from eggs, so he has no idea how to help with a mammalian birth. In a panic, he offers Lu his blood to drink to make her stronger, but she politely declines, joking that her teeth are not sharp enough to pierce his tough scales. Flora then arrives with a bowl of tomato and tofu miso soup, which everyone finds surprisingly delicious. As the sun sets, Lu rests in her bed, surrounded by all the wonderful gifts. She tells Hiraku how incredibly happy she is, and he completely agrees. Hiraku notices a strange wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon among the gifts and asks what it is for. Lu explains that Donovan gave it to her, promising it would come in handy later, though Hiraku cannot imagine how a mallet helps with childbirth. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach in pain, realizing the baby is finally coming. The entire lodge immediately goes into high alert. The maids rush around boiling water, carrying towels, and preparing the room while Lu endures the intense labor pains with Senna holding her hand. Hiraku quickly realizes there is absolutely nothing he can do to help, so he steps outside to stay out of their way. He paces anxiously in the dimly lit halls before wandering out to the edge of the forest. Standing near a small shrine in a rocky cave, he looks out over the landscape under the light of the 2 moons. He reflects on his first night in this world, remembering how he originally just wanted to live completely alone away from everyone else. Now he is surrounded by a massive family and a bustling village. He spends the entire night waiting anxiously in the dark. When morning finally comes, Senna and one of the high elves rush out to tell him the great news. Everything went perfectly, and both Lu and the baby are totally healthy. Hiraku rushes into the room and finds Lu cradling a newborn baby boy with silver hair. She invites Hiraku to hold him. Hiraku nervously takes the baby, making sure to support his neck just as the girls instruct him. He is amazed by how warm and heavy the tiny infant is. The baby shifts and smiles, making Hiraku realize he has truly become a father. Remembering his past life filled with illness and suffering, Hiraku silently prays that his son will never have to experience that kind of pain. He tells Lu that they need to raise him to be strong, and Lu gently corrects him, saying they will raise him to be strong together. A week passes since the birth, and the village is thriving. Lu names their son Alfred. Although he is technically half vampire, he currently just looks like a normal human baby. Hiraku returns to his daily farming duties near the massive ancient tree. He looks around at the huge fields, the bustling villagers, and the large wooden buildings, amazed at how much the settlement has grown since he first arrived. Wanting to thank everyone for their incredible hard work in building up the village, he decides to introduce a new system. He gathers the main girls and presents them with small silver coins engraved with a tree emblem. He calls them reward medals and explains that he wants to use them to compensate everyone for their efforts. The girls are curious, and Hiraku explains that the medals act like money, allowing the villagers to trade them for goods or services. Up until now, Hiraku has been manually distributing all the crops, meat, and resources himself, but with the population growing so rapidly, managing every single transaction has become completely impossible. He uses an example of trading strawberries for apples to show how everyone values things differently, proving the need for a standardized currency. Since introducing actual money all at once would cause too much confusion, he plans to use these medals as a trial run. Hiraku personally crafts the silver coins using his almighty farming tool to ensure they cannot be counterfeited, though it takes a lot of intense effort. He gives every villager 3 medals, while Kuro and Zabuton's large families receive 30 each. The villagers use the medals in completely different ways. Some immediately trade them for wine or weapons, some request custom furniture, and others just use the shiny coins to decorate their rooms. The sudden demand for custom items forces Hiraku to work even harder, constantly chopping wood and building miniature stools and toys. He also establishes a rule that the medals can be used to determine the value of things. Senna hilariously tries to use her medals to buy a baby from Hiraku, which he immediately rejects. To compromise, he allows the villagers to use their medals to rent him out for a day of work instead. Sometime later, the village finally holds a massive feast to celebrate Alfred's birth. Everyone gathers around huge tables in the forest clearing as the sun sets, raising their wooden mugs in a massive toast. Hiraku feels slightly bad for making them wait so long, but Lu assures him that everyone is having a great time. Flora excitedly approaches Hiraku, holding the wooden mallet Donovan gave them earlier. Donovan and another dwarf wheel out a massive wooden barrel marked with special symbols. Donovan proudly announces that it is a brand new kind of wine they brewed specifically to celebrate the baby. Hiraku and Flora take the mallet and smash the lid of the barrel together, sending a massive splash of red wine into the air. The entire village erupts in cheers, and Hiraku gives a speech, expressing his gratitude and telling everyone to drink up. As the night goes on, the dwarves, elves, and beastkin get completely drunk, laughing and celebrating around the bonfires. Hiraku approaches Donovan and Lu. Lu is slightly sad that she still cannot drink because she is breastfeeding, so she just enjoys watching everyone else have fun. Donovan comes up a brilliant idea. Instead of letting the villagers drink all the special wine tonight, he suggests bottling it up and aging it until Alfred is old enough to drink it himself. Hiraku and Lu absolutely love the idea of sharing a drink with their son in the future. Donovan rushes off to secure the wine before the drunken villagers consume it all. Nearby, Flora happily plays with baby Alfred, joking that he loves her so much he wants to be her baby, prompting Hiraku to immediately shut the joke down. Meanwhile, far away in the Demon Kingdom, the Demon Lord Galgardo holds a serious meeting with his generals, Bezel, Randon, and Eris. They discuss the recent news of the baby's birth in the Great Tree Village. Knowing the sheer power of the village's residents, they all agree that launching any kind of attack against them is completely impossible. Randon suggests that they need to focus entirely on maintaining friendly relations and proposes marrying someone from the Demon Kingdom into the village to secure an alliance. He specifically suggests the Demon Lord's daughter, Yuri. Galgardo completely loses his mind, shouting in an absolute panic that he will never hand his precious daughter over to anyone, no matter what. At the exact same time, in a bright coastal city, the merchant Michael Goroon is busy preparing a massive shipment of goods. He orders his staff to gather all the best items they have, wanting to send a perfect congratulatory gift to the village to ensure their incredibly profitable relationship continues for a very long time. Back at the village on a bright sunny day, Hiraku is out in the forest with Tia and the other angels. Tia mentions that Grand Maria received some important news. Drime informed them about a group of people who were driven out of their homes due to a war, and Yuri also mentioned some refugees displaced by the conflict with the Full Heart Kingdom. They are all desperately looking for a new place to live. Hiraku asks how many people need shelter, and Tia reveals that the number is well over 100. Hiraku realizes that bringing that many people into the current settlement would be way too crowded. He immediately decides that they need to build an entirely new village to accommodate the refugees. Tia and the others are thrilled by the idea. They excitedly suggest calling it the Great Tree Village too. Hiraku sweats a bit, realizing how much work it will be to prepare the land and gather supplies, but the Beastkin and High Elves enthusiastically offer their full support. They remind him that the village saved their lives when they had nowhere to go, so they absolutely refuse to turn their backs on people in need. Encouraged by their solid determination, Hiraku smiles and calls for an immediate meeting with everyone to start planning the construction of the new village. The villagers realize they need to prepare for over 100 new arrivals. Hiraku decides they must build an entirely new settlement to accommodate everyone without overcrowding the main area. Everyone immediately gets to work on the massive project. To prepare for the sudden population increase, the residents pitch in by hunting more meat and gathering ingredients to make plenty of preserved foods. The Beastkin and wolves hunt down massive boars in the forest to stock up on meat. Back at the village, Anne and the other ogre maids prepare large batches of food, specifically focusing on vegetable-filled pita sandwiches because they keep well and are incredibly easy to eat on the go. While everyone is busy with the manual labor, Hiraku notices that the village's administrative work is piling up at an alarming rate. He takes a basket of the freshly made vegetable sandwiches over to the village office to check on the civil servant girls. Inside, Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakasi are completely buried behind massive towering mountains of paperwork. They are so incredibly overwhelmed by keeping track of the village's rapidly expanding inventory and supplies that they are visibly exhausted. During their frantic work, one of the girls accidentally sets a document on fire with a magical mishap, filling the room with smoke. Hiraku realizes they desperately need help to manage the load. Fortunately, Florim arrives just in time with a large group of young female students from the Demon Kingdom, all dressed in matching school uniforms. She introduces them as reinforcements to handle the administrative work, claiming that gaining administrative experience here will give them a major edge in high society. The new girls initially think the job will be a fun vacation, excitedly expecting endless apples and a chance to pet cute animals all day. However, the moment they see the towering stacks of documents and the exhausted civil servants, they realize they have been tricked into doing intense labor. One of the new girls is shocked to see a friend she thought was killed by a lamia, only to find her alive and well, working as a civil servant. Florim cheerfully encourages the girls to give it their all, while Hiraku hands out the lunches and leaves them to their misery. The new girls' hopes of petting cute animals are completely shattered when they are introduced to Zabuton and Kuro, finding the giant spider and massive wolf terrifying rather than adorable. Meanwhile, Gran Maria scouts the surrounding forest from the sky and reports back to Hiraku that she has found a safe route with no immediate danger or monster threats. Hiraku and Leah head out to survey potential sites for the new settlement. Since the new village will be subordinate to the Great Tree Village, Leah suggests placing it further downstream. Hiraku agrees and decides to build it on the opposite side of the river. He explains that they need to treat the new residents with caution, noting that if a rebellion or emergency ever occurs, having the river between the two settlements will make it much easier to defend the main village. They soon find a suitable location near a large, prominent tree that stands out in the dense forest, even if it is not as massive as the Great Tree. Once the site is chosen, Hiraku gets right to work clearing the land. A group of elves and the lizardman Daga try to help by cutting down a particularly dense tree with their magic and heavy axes, but their attacks bounce off and barely leave a scratch on the bark. Hiraku steps in and easily summons his almighty farming tool in the form of a glowing axe. He slices the incredibly dense tree in half with a single effortless swing, leaving the elves and Daga completely stunned by his power. With his tool, he quickly clears a huge area of the forest and establishes a wide dirt path connecting the two villages. They also construct a sturdy wooden bridge across the river, making sure to keep the planks narrow enough to prevent massive monsters from crossing over easily. To secure a reliable water supply for the new site, Hiraku builds a complex canal system to bring water down from upstream, creating a reservoir and a dedicated material processing site filled with wooden chutes. Daga tells Hiraku that they are making great progress, but still need a massive amount of lumber to finish the houses. Knowing Hiraku has been working non-stop, Daga urges him to take a break while the others process the wood. Hiraku agrees and spends his downtime carving a detailed wooden statue of Zabuton to place in the clearing. Lu eventually stops by with baby Alfred, gently teasing Hiraku about his inability to stop working. She firmly tells him to actually rest, so he sits down on a log to relax with her and Kuro. Once he is refreshed, the actual construction phase begins in full force. The High Elves, Lizardmen and Maids all work together using the massive stockpiles of lumber they prepared. They strictly follow blueprints that Hiraku drew up in advance, cutting the wood to specific sizes so they can assemble the houses quickly. The elves use their green magic to effortlessly lift heavy wooden walls and snap roof beams directly into place, speeding up the process immensely. Hiraku watches them work and remembers how much he struggled to build his very first tiny hut, completely alone without any nails, amazed at how fast and efficient the village's construction crew has become. Anne and the maids keep the workers fueled by serving hot bowls of soup for lunch directly on the construction site. The work moves so incredibly fast that they even have to implement a strict safety rule forbidding the elves from recklessly throwing heavy wooden planks to each other across the work zone. Eventually, the new village really starts taking shape, with rows of neat, uniform wooden houses lined up perfectly in the clearing. Hiraku and the elves admire their hard work, wondering exactly how many people they are supposed to be taking in. Suddenly, Grandmaria flies down from the sky in an absolute panic, announcing that Drime just contacted her and is bringing the immigrants immediately. Before Hiraku can even process the news, Drime teleports into the clearing in a massive flash of blue magic. He apologizes for the sudden arrival, explaining that the situation was far more urgent than he originally thought, and that his teleportation magic was faster than the messenger wyvern he sent earlier. Drime introduces the new arrivals as a group of 72 minotaurs who were driven out of their home village and left completely stranded on the road. Hiraku is initially surprised, having pictured minotaurs with literal cow heads based on his past knowledge, but sees that they are just very tall, incredibly muscular demi-humans with horns. Their representative, a towering man named Gordon, steps forward to respectfully introduce himself. Hiraku notices that the minotaurs look exhausted, hungry, and are carrying many small children. He immediately orders the maids to prepare food for the refugees. They quickly serve out large bowls of warm porridge to the starving group, allowing them to finally relax. Anne admits she has no idea what minotaurs normally eat or what climate they prefer, but Nerf steps in to help. Since the lizard man used to live near a minotaur settlement in the past, he volunteers to gather their opinions on the food and living conditions. The minotaurs seem very happy with the cool mountain breeze of the forest, so Hiraku decides to formally show them their new homes in the second village. However, the moment Gordon stands next to one of the newly built log cabins, a massive logistical problem becomes glaringly obvious. The minotaurs are all well over 2 meters tall, and the standard-sized wooden houses Hiraku designed are way too small for them to even fit inside comfortably. The ceilings are too low, and the doors are too narrow. With no other option available, Hiraku is forced to move all 72 minotaurs into the main village's large guest house. The massive building quickly becomes extremely crowded as they set up partitions, but it is the only place big enough to accommodate their sheer size. Just as Hiraku tries to figure out a permanent solution, Floram receives an urgent magical communication from her father, Beazle. She announces that he is about to arrive with another large group of immigrants right now. Beazle teleports in looking completely exhausted and drained of energy, explaining that the war situation changed rapidly and he had to use consecutive teleportation spells to evacuate the refugees quickly. He apologizes to Hiraku for the lack of warning before handing the group over and practically collapsing from fatigue. Floram quickly rushes to her father's side to help him rest and recover. Hiraku turns to greet the new arrivals and is completely shocked to see a massive group of female centaurs. The leader of the centaurs, Griwald, steps forward and introduces herself with a highly arrogant and demanding attitude. She proudly declares that she is a relative of the senior steward of the Viscount Beeg family, a known demon noble. She fully expects Hiraku to show proper aristocratic etiquette, and gets visibly angry when he fails to respond with the appropriate level of respect. Hiraku is completely clueless about noble rankings and feels incredibly awkward dealing with her haughty demands. Seeing his distress, Lashashi Droy casually steps out of the village office to intervene. She introduces herself properly, revealing that she is the second daughter of Count Droy. Since a count vastly outranks a viscount, Grewald instantly realizes she has severely insulted a high-ranking noble. Terrified of the consequences, the centaur immediately drops into a desperate prostrate position on the dirt, begging for mercy and apologizing profusely for her extreme rudeness. Lashashi politely tells her to stop making a scene and offers to take charge of the centaurs, noting that it will be good for her family's public image to manage the refugees. Back in the office, the other civil servant girls grumble and complain about Lashashi, using the situation as a convenient excuse to skip out on their endless paperwork. Hiraku leads the centaurs to the new village, hoping they can at least use the empty houses since the minotaurs could not. But once again they face the exact same structural problem. The houses are simply not designed for half-horse anatomy, and the centaurs cannot even squeeze their lower bodies through the doors. Hiraku desperately asks if they can use magic to temporarily shrink themselves like Lu does, but Grewald explains that this is their permanent physical size. With 40 adults and 64 children needing shelter, making 104 centaurs in total, Hiraku realizes the main village's guest house is already completely full of minotaurs. He eventually decides to let the centaurs rent space in the large cowsheds for the time being, or stay in the southern dungeon with the lamias until a much better solution is found. Hiraku starts to seriously wonder if every single refugee group is going to be some massive creature that does not fit into a normal human-sized house. Just then, a group of lamias escorts a new batch of immigrants out of the forest. These arrivals are a group of New Daphne, a rare race of tree spirits. They all look like identical women with green hair, pink eyes, and matching white and green dresses, led by a representative named Igu. Igu carries a small smiling wooden tree stump in her arms. She explains that her people were displaced when their homeland suffered severe flooding due to excessive logging in the area. They heard about the Great Tree Village from Michael the Merchant, and bravely traveled across the dangerous Death Forest entirely on their own. Whenever they encountered vicious monsters, they simply transformed their bodies into tree stumps to blend in with the environment and wait for the danger to pass. Hiraku is incredibly relieved that they are human-sized and offers to throw them a massive banquet, assuming they must be starving after their long, treacherous journey. He eagerly offers to get them some fresh fruit, but Igu politely declines. She explains that tree spirits do not eat regular food at all. Instead, they only require good soil, clean water, and plenty of sunlight to survive. To demonstrate this, she takes the smiling tree stump and places it directly into the dark dirt of a freshly tilled farming field. The stump quickly absorbs the nutrients from the ground, and a beautiful white flower instantly blooms from its small branch. The other tree spirits also express their deep appreciation for the incredibly rich, fragrant soil of the village fields. Hiraku is thrilled by this, realizing that since they are regular human size, they can finally move into the newly constructed houses in the second village. He eagerly offers them the buildings, promising to install much larger windows so they can get plenty of natural sunlight indoors. However, Igu bluntly rejects the generous offer. She explains that as literal tree spirits, they vastly prefer to live completely outdoors so they can experience the rain, wind, and natural elements directly. Hiraku tries his best to convince them that living inside houses is much better and safer, but the New Daphnes completely ignore his reasoning and happily plant their bare feet directly into the middle of the open dirt fields. Night finally falls over the forest, and the entire housing situation is a complete logistical mess. The 72 minotaurs are tightly crammed inside the main village's buildings, the 100 centaurs are sleeping on piles of hay inside the cowsheds, and the tree spirits are literally standing completely motionless in the dirt fields under the moonlight. Meanwhile, the freshly built, meticulously constructed Great Tree Village 2 sits entirely completely deserted in the dark, with absolutely no one using the new houses. Inside the main wooden lodge, one of the high elves collapses face down on the floor in absolute comical exhaustion, realizing that all their intense physical labor over the past few weeks was completely pointless. Despite the massive failure of their initial housing plan, the villagers refuse to just give up. The elf springs back up from the floor with renewed determination, declaring that they need to completely rethink their architectural designs from scratch. With so many large demi-humans currently crammed into the main settlement, they know things are going to be chaotic and cramped for a while. Everyone gathers their tools and blueprints, fully prepared to start the entire construction process all over again to build massive, custom-sized houses capable of properly sheltering all the minotaurs and centaurs. Hiraku officially apologizes to the representatives of the new immigrants for not having suitable homes ready for them when they arrived. He introduces them to the people who will help them settle in, assigning Narf to look after the Minotaurs, Lashashi to take charge of the Centaurs, and a beast woman named Mam to help the new Daphne based on a recommendation from Senna. Gruwald acts incredibly formal and subservient towards Hiraku, treating him like absolute royalty and calling herself a flake of dust in his presence. So he quickly tells everyone to drop the formalities and just relax since they are all living together now. Because the original village was only designed for human-sized beings, Hiraku explains his plan to build entirely separate villages for the Minotaurs and Centaurs to make their daily lives easier. He uses the locations that Leah and the other elves scouted earlier in the forest. To get the new sites ready, they need to clear massive amounts of trees to build roads and irrigation channels. Hiraku asks for everyone's help, and Lasti immediately volunteers. However, when Lasti unleashes her dragon magic, she shoots a colossal beam of energy that completely obliterates a huge swath of the forest. Hiraku completely panics, fearing that she might accidentally destroy the entire forest of death if she keeps going at that rate. He quickly tells her and the others to hold back their power and just use normal physical labor instead. The group switches to using axes, shovels, and controlled magic to slowly clear the path alongside the river. As the construction continues, the residents back at the main village focus on everyday life, with Zabuton knitting a bunch of new clothes for baby Alfred, though Lou notes that the outfits are still a bit too large for him. Meanwhile, Anne manages to calm a fussy Alfred by making a secret funny face, refusing to show Lou what she actually did. Back at the construction sites, the second village is specifically designed to accommodate the Minotaurs. Because of their massive height, Hiraku builds very tall, one-story homes with extra-large furniture, so they do not feel like children sitting in tiny chairs. He even designs custom beds with special slots cut into the wood so the Minotaurs can sleep comfortably without their large horns getting in the way. Gordon is absolutely thrilled with the new accommodations. Over at the third village, Hiraku builds homes that resemble large wooden stables to perfectly suit the centaurs' horse-like lower bodies. Since they have trouble operating normal doors, he leaves the entrances wide open and installs heavy rope-drawn curtains and sliding doors for rainy days. After a month of non-stop hard work, both of the new settlements are finally completed before the winter cold sets in. Hiraku meets with Lou, Tia, and the civil servant girls to discuss what they should actually name the new settlements. He initially considers fancy names like Upton, Middleton, and Downton, but the civil servant girls practically beg him not to do that because rewriting all the official paperwork and maps would be a total nightmare. To make things simple, Hiraku officially names the settlements Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3. He then appoints Gordon as the mayor of Village 2 and Gruwald as the mayor of Village 3. The girls point out that if Gordon and Gruwald are mayors, Hiraku needs a grander title to establish a clear hierarchy, suggesting names like High Mayor or King Mayor. Hiraku instantly rejects the idea, wanting to keep things as casual as possible. Next, he turns his attention to the new Daphne. Since the tree spirits completely refuse to live inside houses, they do not get their own dedicated village. Instead, Hiraku asks them to use their natural telepathy to act as an information network. He places them at important locations around the area to stand watch and relay simple messages between the settlements. He also asks them to watch over the uninhabited village 1, so the buildings do not go to waste, and since they can naturally glow, they conveniently double as streetlights for the forest paths at night. With the housing situation finally resolved, Hiraku tries to assign standard jobs to the new residents. However, a major problem arises when the Minotaurs and Centaurs try to hunt in the forest. The local monsters, like the vicious red-eyed rabbits, are far too dangerous for them to handle. The Minotaurs are naturally peaceful and lack hunting skills, while the Centaurs are mostly refugees with no combat experience. Even the tree spirits are only suited for ambush tactics and cannot hunt large groups of prey. Hiraku realizes that the main village only survived this long because Kuro's Inferno wolves and Zabuton's spiders are incredibly overpowered and handled all the dangerous hunting for them. To keep everyone safe, Hiraku strictly forbids the newcomers from entering the deeper woods and stations several wolves and giant spiders in Village 2 and Village 3 to act as permanent defenders. Since hunting is out of the question, Hiraku decides to make the new villages entirely self-sufficient through farming. They clear large plots of land and distribute tools, but to their dismay, none of the seeds they plant actually take root. The villagers are completely confused about why the crops are failing until Hiraku realizes the core issue. Up until now, he has been using his almighty farming tool to perfectly till the soil and make crops grow instantly, completely ignoring the natural rules of seasons, weather, and soil quality. Because of his magical tool, no one in the village actually knows the correct time of year to plant normal seeds. Gordon steps up to help, revealing that he used to do some farm work back in his old village. He explains that since winter is approaching, they need to dig deep into the earth, plant winter wheat, and lay down dried straw to keep the soil warm. The group follows Gordon's advice, planting the seeds and accepting that they will have to wait half a year for the harvest, instead of getting food instantly like they usually do. Grateful for his healthy life and the success of the village, Hiraku decides to carve 2 wooden statues to honor the gods. He makes one for the god of creation holding a staff and another for the god of agriculture, placing them in a small shrine. However, he accidentally carves the god of agriculture as an old man with a beard, completely unaware that the actual deity is a goddess. While the Minotaurs focus entirely on managing the new agricultural fields, the Centaurs use their natural speed to develop a new line of work. They establish a delivery service to transport goods and supplies between the 3 villages. Since they can easily outrun any monsters in the area, the adult centaurs take turns hauling heavy wooden carts filled with crates and barrels. They get a little too enthusiastic on their first run, setting a new speed record before violently crashing a cart and sending their cargo flying into the air. After recovering from the rough landing, they quickly learn to prioritize safety and smooth out the delivery routes. During all this, Hiraku decides he wants to try riding a normal horse since Michael the merchant recently brought some to the village. He tries to befriend a black horse with a carrot, but the animal completely ignores him. He asks Gruwald if she can use some kind of animal communication to help, but she admits she does not speak horse. Instead, she offers to let Hiraku ride on her back to experience it. Hiraku agrees and hops onto the centaur's back, holding onto her shoulders as they speed through the forest. As they ride, the black horse gets intensely jealous of the attention. The next day, the black horse aggressively approaches Hiraku, snorting magical sparks, and demands to be ridden. Hiraku happily pets the beast and mounts it, but Gruwald quickly spots them and gets furious that the horse is stealing her time with the mayor. To keep the peace and stop them from fighting over him, Hiraku promises to ride the black horse and Gruwald on alternating days. Later, Mam checks in on the tree spirit stump to see if it needs anything. The stump simply asks about the sky, and when Mam happily replies that it is blue, the stump magically transforms into a small cute wooden creature. As the days pass, the wheat in the fields finally starts to take root properly under Gordon's guidance. Hiraku relaxes under a tree with Lou and baby Alfred, but he admits he is deeply worried about the future. He points out that the entire village's survival heavily relies on his almighty farming tool, and he fears that if he ever catches a cold or gets severely injured, the villages will starve. Lou gently tells him that he is overthinking things and advises him to just relax and deal with problems as they come, instead of stressing over hypothetical disasters. Feeling slightly better, Hiraku turns his attention to another major issue that has been bothering him for a while. The Great Tree Village is completely overflowing with women, and the severe lack of men makes him worry about the future population. He hopes that the new immigrants will help balance the gender ratio, so he approaches the representatives to ask about their marriage customs. Gordon quickly shuts down his hopes regarding the Minotaurs, explaining that due to their massive physical size, Minotaurs can only safely marry other Minotaurs. Hiraku then asks Gruwald about the Centaurs, noting that while they brought 30 males, they are all just young boys. Gruwald confirms that all their adult men are currently away fighting in a distant war. Hoping to find a solution, Hiraku carefully asks if centaurs ever marry people from other races. Gruwald explains that it is very rare, but she completely misinterprets his line of questioning. Thinking that Hiraku is demanding a centaur bride as payment for allowing them to live in the village, she gets incredibly flustered. She proudly declares that she is single and passionately offers herself to him. Assuming that human men love overpowering strong, athletic women, Hiraku violently waves his hands and frantically calms her down, clarifying that he absolutely was not proposing to her or demanding a servant. He simply wanted to know about their demographics. After clearing up the massive misunderstanding, Hiraku accepts that the different races will likely just stick to their own kind for marriages, leaving him to figure out another way to solve the village's population imbalance in the future. Make sure to subscribe to find out what happens in the next part. See you in the next one.